I'm Jessica. Today, I want to share a personal story about my life. I'll talk about my tough childhood filled with family problems and how I found my own way. Growing up, I often felt invisible, like I didn't matter. My parents, Carol and David, were very different from each other and often argued loudly. Their fighting created a heavy tension in our home that lasted even after they stopped shouting. "Carol, why can't you see things my way?" David would yell, filled with frustration. "Because not everything you think is right," Carol would respond, her voice strong but tired. As a young girl, I found comfort in hiding in small corners of our house, holding a book or a doll, trying to be as unnoticeable as possible. These fights happened often and built a wall between me and my parents. But it was their divorce that really changed how I saw the world and my place in it. David left suddenly, creating a gap where a father should be. He quickly moved on, getting new partners and even having new kids. This made me feel even more like an afterthought in his life. "Jessica, it's just you and me now. We'll manage on our own," Carol said softly but firmly, trying to bring some normalcy back to our lives. Her strength was both inspiring and sad. Despite struggling to pay bills and working many hours, Carol's love never faded. She held multiple jobs, like waitressing and selling crafts at markets. Our home was small and we didn't have many luxuries, but Carol's love filled it with warmth and laughter. "Let's bake some cookies, Jessica. It will make the house smell nice," she would say on her rare days off. These simple moments became the best parts of my childhood, a happy contrast to how I felt ignored and neglected by David. As time went on, I realized how devoted Carol was to raising me. She was my anchor amid the emotional storms caused by David's absence. Each birthday he missed and every school event he didn't attend made me feel more abandoned. Tragedy struck during my junior year of college when my mother, Carol, passed away unexpectedly. Her absence left a huge hole in my life, making me feel even more alone. At her funeral, the many mourners around me only deepened my feelings of solitude. David, who had been so distant in my life, suddenly appeared. "Jessica, I'm so sorry, your mom was amazing," he said awkwardly, his voice unfamiliar. Despite our past, he helped with the funeral arrangements, giving me a small hope that we could possibly repair our broken relationship in the weeks that followed. As I tried to adjust to my new life without Carol, I thought about reconnecting with David. With his 50th birthday coming up, I saw a chance to bridge the long gap between us. "I think I'll throw David a big 50th birthday party," I told my friend Sarah while we drank coffee at a cozy cafe. The idea felt like a big step, like reaching out across the gap between us. "That's really generous of you, but are you sure? It's a lot of emotional investment," Sarah replied, looking worried. "It's what Mom would have wanted," I said, my voice mixed with determination and doubt. She always hoped we'd make up, and maybe this was a way to start. Preparing for the party helped distract me from my grief. I dove into planning, picking the perfect venue, choosing a menu that David would enjoy, and inviting all his friends and family. Every detail was carefully thought out, showing my hope for a fresh start. When the day of the party arrived, I felt cautiously optimistic. The venue looked beautiful, decorated with David's favorite flowers, and soft music filled the air. Guests started to arrive, their faces showing excitement and curiosity. However, as the time for David to arrive came and went, my anxiety grew. 30 minutes turned into an hour. Just when I was about to call him, my phone buzzed with a message. "Sorry, running a bit late, kiddo. See you soon," David texted. His casual tone didn't help ease the knot in my stomach. Finally, he showed up, but not alone. He brought his new wife, Lisa, and her son, Michael, who looked a bit out of place among my mother's friends and our family. The tension in the room was thick as David walked through the crowd, greeting people in a detached way. As the night went on, the initial warmth of the party faded into a strained politeness. I watched from a distance, feeling heavy-hearted as David interacted with Lisa and Michael, laughing and sharing stories while I remained on the sidelines. I was the event organizer, but felt strangely disconnected. The evening was filled with a mix of hope and disappointment, highlighting the stark difference between what I expected and what was actually happening. This moment became crucial in redefining my relationship with David. What was meant to be a gesture of reconciliation instead emphasized the deep divisions between us, setting the stage for a confrontation that would change everything. David's 50th birthday party was filled with a mix of cautious hope and celebration. Guests filled the beautifully decorated venue, but I felt nervous underneath my calm exterior. Everything had been arranged perfectly, the shiny silverware, flickering candles, and the soft chatter of familiar voices. It all looks lovely, Jessica. You've really outdone yourself, Aunt Maggie whispered, squeezing my hand for reassurance. Thanks, I just hope he appreciates it, I replied as time dragged on. Each minute felt longer as we waited for David to arrive. Finally, he arrived an hour late, visibly drunk, with Lisa and Michael by his side. The energy in the room shifted, and discomfort filled the air. Look at this place, Jessica sure knows how to throw a party when she wants to, David slurred, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. Lisa laughed awkwardly and glanced around. Yes, it's quite something. When I went to greet them, David leaned in, his breath smelling of alcohol. You really didn't have to do all this, kid, but it's nice, really nice. As dinner continued, an underlying tension grew. I watched David, Lisa, and Michael laughing together, sharing inside jokes that were often too loud. Guests exchanged uneasy looks, their polite smiles hiding their discomfort. When it was time for David to speak, the room quieted in anticipation. He clinked his glass and stood unsteadily. I want to thank everyone for coming tonight, especially my beautiful wife Lisa and my stepson Michael. They're my real family now. They make every day worth living. A murmur went through the crowd as my heart sank with every word. Then he added, and to my daughter Jessica, well, she's here too, always trying to make things right. But we all have our regrets, don't we? My biggest was probably saying, I do to her mother, wouldn't you agree? David's casual cruelty cut through the murmurs like a knife. My face burned as everyone turned to look at me with pity and shock. With my voice tight from emotion, I managed to say, is that really what you think, David? Oh, come on, lighten up. It's just a joke, he laughed, but the damage was done. The room fell silent, the festive mood shattered. Feeling a mix of anger and devastation, I made a quick decision. I think it's best if you leave, David. Please just go. David scoffed, fine. Come on, Lisa, Michael, let's go somewhere we're appreciated. As they left, whispers began, but amid the chaos, I felt a strange sense of relief. The evening ended not with the joy I hoped for, but with a clarity I didn't realize I needed. This birthday, meant to bring us closer, only confirmed the vast distance between us and marked the end of my attempts to bridge that gap. After the disastrous birthday party, the fallout was swift and harsh. My phone buzzed nonstop with messages from Lisa and Michael, each one more hurtful than the last. You embarrassed David in front of everyone. What kind of daughter does that? Lisa's message flashed across my screen, setting the tone for the blame and anger to follow. Nice job ruining Dad's 50th, Jessica. You really showed your true colors tonight, Michael added, his words like salt in an open wound. As the messages piled up, my resolve to maintain any connection with David and his new family started to crumble. The pain of his speech echoed in my mind, replaying during the quiet moments of the night. His jokes felt like deliberate jabs, undermining the fragile relationship we had. In the midst of this turmoil, David tried to reach out. His texts were a mix of awkward apologies and excuses. Jessica, I didn't mean it like that. You know I get stupid when I drink. Can we talk? Everyone says things they don't mean. Let's not let this ruin what we're trying to build. But what were we trying to build? His actions spoke louder than his half-hearted messages, revealing a truth I had always known but never fully accepted. Each message and attempted call pulled me deeper into a whirlpool of emotion. I longed for a family connection, but also needed to protect my mental health. This internal battle was exhausting, leaving me drained and uncertain. One evening, sitting alone in my apartment with the weight of everything pressing down, I opened my journal and began to write. The words flowed out, messy and raw. Why do I keep doing this to myself? Why do I let him in only to be hurt again and again? That's when I realized that while the desire for familial love would always be part of me, it shouldn't come at the cost of my well-being. This realization was painful yet freeing. Deciding to take control, I responded to David with a finality that surprised even me. I need space. The things you said hurt more than you know. Maybe one day we can try again, but for now, I have to step back for my own good. Sending that message felt like closing a heavy door on a windy night, difficult but necessary. The immediate silence that followed was a relief, though the echoes of those hurtful words lingered. In the days that followed, I focused on healing and rebuilding the peace in my life that family chaos had disrupted. I spent time with friends who lifted me up, took long walks in the park, and rediscovered the joys of solitude and self-care. Slowly, my anger and pain began to fade, replaced by a cautious hope for a future on my own terms. In the weeks after my father's birthday, I decided to step back from David, Lisa, and Michael. While this choice was painful, it became the foundation of my journey towards self-reliance and personal growth. Detaching wasn't easy, it took conscious effort every day. At first, there were moments of doubt and loneliness, especially when my phone stayed silent in my small apartment. But I filled those silences with new activities that gradually transformed my life. I dove into my career, taking on new projects that excited me. The sense of accomplishment I felt at work boosted my confidence and spilled over into other areas of my life. I joined a local book club where I met people who shared my love for literature. One evening, my new friend Elena said, "It's so refreshing to discuss books with someone as insightful as you, Jessica." Her simple, sincere words highlighted the value of the connections I was building, connections based on mutual respect and shared interests, rather than family obligation. As the months went by, the pain of separating from my family faded into a dull ache, overshadowed by the vibrant new relationships I was creating. I learned to enjoy my own company, which made me more selective about who I spent my time with. With each passing day, I found peace in my independent life. Long walks became my meditation, and writing in my journal every evening helped me process my thoughts and emotions, turning chaotic whispers into coherent narratives. One evening, sitting in my favorite corner of my apartment with a cup of tea, I gazed out at the city lights. The bustling sounds outside brought a comforting realization: I was part of a larger world where I could make my own choices and shape my own destiny. I used to think being alone meant being lonely, I mused, but now I see it means being strong, content with who I am, and knowing what I want. The decision to distance myself from David and his family had been emotionally difficult, but it led me to a moment of clarity and contentment. I no longer felt tied to the painful dynamics of my past. Instead, I felt free to build a future that resonated with who I was and who I wanted to be. As I set down my tea and picked up a pen to jot down thoughts for a new project, a smile spread across my face. Embracing solitude had not only brought me peace, but also opened doors to new opportunities and experiences I never thought possible. Looking ahead, I felt excited about the chapters yet to be written in my life, confident that I was on a path of my own making. The peace I found in solitude was profound, a testament to the strength that comes from choosing oneself. I was eager to see where this newfound independence would lead me. As we conclude Jessica's journey of self-discovery and personal growth, it raises a thought-provoking question: is cutting ties with family members a valid option for protecting one's mental health? Or should family always be preserved, no matter the emotional cost? Please share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video if you found Jessica's story compelling, and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. Your support helps us continue to share these narratives.
Risa, while you were away, I moved my parents' stuff into our house.
What? What do you mean by that?
While I was on a trip, my husband Polly had moved his parents' moving boxes into our house without asking. And on top of that, I received unbelievable treatment from Polly. You should not come back anymore. Polly doesn't want me to come back home anymore. Even though this house is where our family has always lived, Polly wants to kick me out and live with his parents. However, I had anticipated being kicked out by Polly and easily retorted, "Okay, I'll move out on my own." I sought advice from my dad, Mike, and took a certain action. First, I sent an email to someone and made a plan. I returned to America with Mike. And then, I came back to our house. I started to execute the plan as intended. Polly, who had been naively thinking he could live with his parents, was surprised by the unexpected turn of events. Actually, the plan I had made with Mike was: my name is Risa. I am a 45-year-old dietitian working in a hospital. Originally, I was supposed to follow in Mike's footsteps, but inheriting my mom's love for cooking, I became a dietitian. However, my beloved mom passed away before I graduated from college. After that, Mike started working in France, so we sold the house I was born and raised in, and I started living alone in an apartment. Being plain-looking since childhood, I've always been inconspicuous wherever I go. Moreover, attending girls' schools from middle school to university, I had no encounters with men, and I had never had a boyfriend. However, I was fortunate to meet good people wherever I went, and after graduating from college, I got married. At that friend's wedding, I met my current husband, Polly, who was 3 years older than me and a friend of the groom. He seemed like the type who would be popular with the ladies. Luckily, or perhaps coincidentally, he had just broken up with his girlfriend. His ex-girlfriend was a nurse, and it seems they broke up due to misaligned schedules and night shifts. When I mentioned that I was a dietitian with early mornings and few holidays, he was very pleased. However, at that time, I was busy studying for the national exam for registered dietitians, so I was busy on weekends. Even so, he was kind enough to send me messages, saying, "I miss not being able to see you, but good luck with your studies." Feeling a sense of destiny with him, I thought I'd like to marry him if I passed. And on the day of the exam results, he invited me out to celebrate my passing that night. "Congratulations on passing! This is how I feel, would you accept it?" What he handed me was an engagement ring. He proposed to me right then and there. Overjoyed as if my passing was his own, I tearfully said yes right away. And so, our married life began. At first, we thought about living in an apartment, but with Mike's help, we bought our own home. I was looking forward to a happy life from now on, but after getting married, I started to feel a sense of discomfort around Polly. Thinking it was because I had no experience with men, I assumed it would be okay once I got used to it. However, one day, when Polly was looking at my pay stub, he made a comment that made me do a double take. "What's this?" I thought dietitians, being professionals, would earn more. I'm disappointed. What? Well, I just started working, and we're both working, so an income of around $200,000 should be fine, right? I retorted, feeling somewhat offended. It's not like I got married to be supported by my husband, but being told my salary was low didn't feel good. Yet, Polly went on to insult my earnings further. I've been totally deceived. If I knew the income was this low, I would have asked before getting married. A nurse would have earned more. Polly must have been talking about his ex-girlfriend. It's one thing to complain about my earnings, but comparing me to his ex-girlfriend is unforgivable. Indeed, nurses receive night shift allowances and holiday pay. In comparison, my salary is lower because I have fewer early mornings and holiday shifts. However, I have my own side of the story to tell. I happened to see Polly's pay stub the other day, and it turns out he earns even less than I do. Yet, I thought we wouldn't struggle with our combined incomes, so I didn't say anything. I tried to gently break it to Polly, not wanting to hurt his pride. "Well, it seems like you have it tough too, so I guess you were hoping for a bit more from my salary. Sorry for not meeting your expectations." That's right. I work for a small company, and my salary is really low, so I wanted to marry a professional woman to achieve financial stability. I only meant to cheer him up with what I didn't even believe myself, but I never thought Polly would take it seriously. Before we got married, he was happy that my work hours were regular, but after we got married, he complained about my low income as if he had changed his stance. What kind of world does a man live in where he expects his wife's income to be higher than his? I was just dumbfounded by Polly's unreliable behavior. As soon as he knew about my income, Polly started looking down on me. Yet, He wouldn't hesitate to buy whatever he wanted without restraint. Even when I asked him to be a bit more frugal, he wouldn't listen at all.
I've been spoiled by my parents since I was a kid, buying me whatever I wanted, so I can't change my attitude towards money that easily.
I couldn't say anything back to such a spoiled statement from Polly. It's no excuse to say that he was spoiled by his parents when he was a child at his age. The following year after we got married, we were blessed with a boy. I hoped that becoming a parent would change Polly, but his habit of spending recklessly didn't improve, even during childcare. It was always the same with him, spending his entire salary. If it wasn't enough, he'd sneak money from my wallet without me noticing. While I was struggling to manage work and budgeting while raising our son, Cedric, Polly hardly contributed to childcare. As time passed, struggling through these tough days, Cedric is now preparing for his college entrance exams this year. Thanks to my careful budgeting, it looks like we can afford to send him to college. Cedric, understanding our financial situation, has been studying hard to enter a national university. Yet, Polly came up with a ridiculous idea. Because I bought a new car last year, the loan repayments are tough. Plus, there's Cedric's exams, right? So, I've decided to sell my parents' house and have them move in with us.
Wait, what are you saying? Suddenly living together like that, it's going to be a problem.
Why?
Risa, you get along with my parents, right? If we live together, we'll get their pension and become wealthier.
Indeed, I don't hate the idea of living with my in-laws. It's just that I didn't like Polly's way of making decisions on his own. In terms of finances, we've been managing well so far, so there shouldn't be a problem as long as we don't indulge in luxuries.
Why do you always decide everything selfishly? Even the new car, you bought it without consulting me. That's my car, so I don't need to consult you every time.
Seeing Polly's selfish behavior, this time, Cedric got furious.
Dad, enough is enough. When I go to college, I might come home late from part-time jobs or clubs. If grandparents Arnold and Rothy are living with us, it's going to be awkward, right? Why don't you discuss these things properly with Mom?
Cedric, coming out of his room all of a sudden and raising his voice, left Polly wide-eyed in surprise. But the next moment, Polly turned to me, lashing out as if he was taking it out on me.
Cedric talking back to me, his dad, like that is because of your poor parenting. Reflect on it.
Saying that, Polly locked himself in his room and didn't come out for a while. I was happy that Cedric stood up for me. However, I was worried that the current home environment would affect his exam preparations. Despite my worries, Cedric successfully passed his first-choice national university. But tired of living with Polly, Cedric decided to move out and start living on his own. He said he wants to try his best on his own without relying on his parents, even if it means working part-time. Even so, Polly continues to ignore both me and Cedric. Ever since it's been just Polly and me at home, we don't even talk though we're in the same house. It feels suffocating. During these days, feeling mentally drained, I called my dad Mike in France to seek advice. Mike, worried about me, suggested I come to France for a while. I thought I couldn't take a long break because of my job, but it seems my colleagues were worried about my pale complexion recently. After explaining the situation, I was allowed to take some time off. However, I wanted to keep my consultation with Mike a secret from Polly. So, I told him I was invited on a trip by a friend. I hoped that if I was away for a while, Polly might cool down a bit. But heading to Mike's, an entirely unexpected situation unfolded. Starting with a call from Polly while I was in France.
Risa, I've moved my parents' stuff into our house while you were away. What? What do you mean?
What do you mean, what?
I've been saying, haven't I?
that I'd live with my parents. More than that, Dad and Mom are angry with you. They said a wife who spoils their son like you is the worst. No way. I couldn't believe what Polly was saying. My in-laws shouldn't be the type to speak ill of me like that. So, I've decided we'll live with my parents and me from now on. If you were here, it'd inconvenience my parents. After all, you're the strict wife who makes their son speak ill of them. Polly must have badmouthed me to my in-laws. Maybe the part about them being angry with me was also a fabrication. Angry, I thought about shouting something back. But, to stay calm, I just said, "I'll call you back later," and hung up. Luckily, Mike was home, so I immediately shared the phone call's content with him. Mike, looking disgruntled, shook his head. Polly, really? Relying on his parents at his age. That's what I'm saying. I don't understand why I have to be the one kicked out. After a long discussion, Mike came up with a suggestion that excited me. I thought this would teach Polly a lesson. First, I contacted someone by email, then called Polly's mobile phone. Polly, talking over the phone won't cut it, so let's discuss this when I get back from my trip. I said this calmly, but Polly, with a laugh in his voice, replied, "You shouldn't come back." Just as Mike advised, Polly didn't want me to return home. Expecting this, I retorted easily, "Okay, got it. I'll just move out on my own." Huh? Polly sounded taken aback by my unexpected response. But thinking I was just bluffing, he laughed and replied, "Move out? Where to, when you have nowhere to go?" "Oh, to the place I'm currently at."
What are you talking about? You're on a trip with friends. Wait, you're not with a man, are you?
Now he seemed to misunderstand that I was with a lover, so I decided to reveal the truth. Well, if it's a man, it's indeed a man. But, you know, it's Dad. Mike's place. Polly sounded relieved. But he'd be surprised by the next part of the conversation. Dad's living in a mansion in France now, so I've decided to live here too. That's why we're going to sell the house we've been living in.
What? What do you mean?
Well, you should know, right? That house is in Dad's name, built for us. If I'm not living there, it's to be sold.
What? But Dad and Mom are here right now. What are you going to do?
That's what I said. It's no use talking over the phone. Polly, finally grasping the situation, hung up without saying anything else. He can't possibly imagine the further tragedy waiting for him upon my return to America. A week later, I returned home with Mike, where Polly was living with my in-laws. At the entrance, my in-laws greeted us with smiles. "Mike, it's been a long time." "Yes, I can't often return to America due to work. Risa has always been under your care." While Mike and my father-in-law Arnold were exchanging greetings, Polly quietly emerged. It seemed he hadn't yet informed them about the house sale. Looking awkward, Polly just bowed his head. "Polly, the movers are coming today to pick up the stuff. Have you prepared everything?" "All your stuff is already packed." "Oh, it's not just my things that are being moved out."
Huh? Do I have to move my things out today, too?
Polly's surprised shout caught Arnold's attention. "What's going on, Polly? Why are your things being moved out?" Polly, looking guilty, hesitantly explained the situation. Arnold became furious and started yelling at Polly.
You said this house was bought under your name with a loan so we could live together. Making your parents ashamed, unforgivable.
Arnold's thunderous voice left Polly speechless. Then, the moving truck arrived. After my things were moved out, my mother-in-law Rothy came out to direct the movers. "Thank you for your hard work. our stuff is prepared here, please take it. Rothy had neatly prepared all the household items, including Polly's. Seeing this, Polly was dumbfounded.
Mom? What's happening? Why are you packing Dad's stuff too? Where are you planning to take it?
Watching Polly panic and question Rothy, we all burst into laughter.
You've been completely fooled. What? What's going on? Why is everyone laughing all of a sudden?
Indeed, this was all a plan to trick Polly, discussed in advance by everyone here. The first person I contacted by email from France was Rothy. Rothy had been worried about my tired appearance for some time. After repeatedly asking why, I ended up telling Rothy everything about Polly. Rothy was shocked, especially at the part where Polly blamed his extravagant habits on his parents spoiling him. Rothy tearfully apologized for her parenting in front of me, which made me feel guilty. But Polly's wasteful spending wasn't Rothy's fault. As I comforted Rothy, our bond deepened. For me, without a mom, Rothy became someone I could consult about anything. Mike was aware of my close relationship with Rothy. Thus, he suggested involving the in-laws in our plan. Rothy, without letting Polly know, had been looking for a new place for them to live with Arnold. Arnold's scolding of Polly was all an act. I nearly burst out laughing at their convincing performance.
Rothy, thank you for arranging the movers for me as well. Now, I can move to the house Dad built in France.
I'm sorry, Risa. My son has caused you so much trouble.
Rothy, we agreed not to say that, didn't we?
Rothy and I laughed together. Polly, unaware of how close I was with his parents, looked surprised. Mom, where are we moving to? We've already sold our family home. We've already arranged a new place for us. Polly seemed relieved at Rothy's words. But that relief would soon be short-lived.
So, it was like that. I worried for nothing. Then I'll just go there too, right?
What are you talking about?
That's a senior living apartment for Arnold to live in with someone else. Polly, you're not a child anymore. Find your own place to live.
As soon as Rothy said this, Polly's face turned pale.
That's impossible! I don't even have the money for moving, let alone find a new place.
Indeed, Polly had squandered his salary on hobbies and entertainment, leaving him with no savings. No matter how he struggled now, it was his own responsibility. Desperate, Polly looked at me with pleading eyes. I could guess what he was about to say.
By the way, Mike built quite a big house in France, right? I had no idea you were such a well-off lady. Listen, I'll do anything you say from now on, so could you take me with you to that house?
Suddenly speaking in a sweet tone, he was indeed trying to rely on me. I had no intention of indulging such naive thoughts and firmly stated my position.
I've been fooled by your kind words on occasion, but I can't forgive you anymore. You've barely contributed to our living expenses and have just been playing around. I don't want to be your wife anymore. I've already discussed this with Cedric on the phone yesterday, and we've decided to get a divorce. Cedric agrees it's for the best.
I vented the feelings I had been holding back, feeling a sense of relief. My in-laws seemed to agree, nodding deeply.
What am I supposed to do now?
Polly cried, tears in his eyes, but my decision was firm. I presented him with the divorce papers and demanded his signature. Yet, Polly stubbornly refused to sign. Seeing this, Arnold showed his anger again.
Polly, enough is enough. After all the trouble you've caused Risa, now you're thinking of relying on her parents' home. I'm ashamed to call you my son.
That's right. I admit, I've spoiled you too much. But Polly, you're an adult now. Stop being so selfish and start living on your own. Convinced by his parents' earnest persuasion, Polly shed tears.
What? Even Dad and Mom? Do I have no allies here?
Muttering so, Polly signed the divorce papers. He then arranged to store his belongings in a storage unit and left the house alone. Betrayed by the parents he thought were on his side, he was visibly shocked. However, the in-laws had decided to cut ties with Polly. Not just them. I also promised never to let Polly see Cedric again. This was a strong request from Cedric. He had always resented Polly for never acting like a father. With the divorce as an opportunity, Cedric wanted to sever ties with Polly. I thought it was for the best for Cedric. Rejected by his parents and disowned by his son, Polly must have lost the will to live. Having lost everything, Polly spent some time living in monthly rental hotels and internet cafes. But once he received his salary, he managed to move into an apartment where he could live alone. During the divorce, I gave Polly a small amount of money as part of our shared assets. It was practically nothing, but I wanted to avoid any future claims for money, given my financial situation. In essence, it was severance pay. However, once Polly had a bit of financial leeway, he started getting into partying. Why do I know this? Because Polly contacted me, saying,
"I'll find a woman with a good income and make you regret leaving me."
Initially, after becoming alone, Polly would contact me just to express his loneliness. But once he had money, his attitude became arrogant again. After some time, the communications from Polly suddenly stopped. I wondered if he had found a new girlfriend, but it turned out the situation was far more serious. According to the former in-laws, Polly had fallen for a nurse he met at a party. Despite not being reciprocated, Polly persistently pursued her. At worst, he even showed up at her apartment. As a result of his relentless stalking, he was reported and arrested in the act. The former in-laws, having intended to sever parental ties, were troubled by their son's scandal, feeling deeply sorry for them. Being a parent is tough. No matter how much you try to distance yourself, you're still responsible when something happens. Despite causing so much trouble for his parents, Polly seemed unrepentant. During the interrogation,
"It was true love,"
he kept insisting. This led to a judgment that he was not remorseful, and his release was delayed. Such a man is better off cooling his head in prison for a while. After all, a penniless man in his 50s chasing such ideals will only cause annoyance. Now, I live elegantly in a mansion in France with Mike. Still not accustomed to the environment and not fluent in French, I'm not working yet. However, I can't stay unemployed forever, so I'm attending French lessons. Once I'm proficient in the language, I plan to help out with Mike's company. As time passed, Cedric graduated from university. He then moved here to work at Mike's company. In fact, Mike had called him over with the intention of making Cedric his successor. It was lonely being apart from Cedric for 4 years, but now we can live together forever. This thought fills me with joy. Now that I've become quite fluent in French, I assist with Mike's company and work as a cooking class instructor locally. Though my marriage failed, my life in France is very fulfilling. Despite being in my mid-40s, this is an ideal environment to enjoy life. I've decided to forget my past self, who worried about being plain and unpopular, and live positively. After all, there's still so much more to come. Surely, Mom in heaven is watching over me.
Vivian's room looks different. Did you just realize that? Aren't you a bit slow? Or perhaps you're getting dementia. Please, don't be a nuisance to us.
Rocky and his wife, Ava, laughed as they saw me standing frozen in front of my own room. These people are devils. They're trying to drive me out of the house. I had a bad feeling about this since I arrived, and it turned out to be true. Ava's words made Rocky laugh with a sneer as well. However, they seem to be under one misunderstanding. They think the mortgage on this house is already paid off. If so, I must use this to my advantage. The disdain they show me will only last for now.
Are you really okay with this? Even if I'm gone? Of course. Did you think you were needed?
Their laughter will only last for now. My name is Florence, 54 years old. I gave birth twice in my early 20s and have gone through a divorce. I raised 2 sons as a single mother. My eldest son's name is Rocky, 30 years old. He's married with children. My granddaughter is truly adorable. Her name is Vivian. She just turned 3 and will enter preschool next year. Since my younger son, Joseph, has also left, I've decided to live freely and went ahead to buy a house. I finished raising my children relatively early, so I've been working hard. That's why I had some savings. However, due to a long period of being poor, I've gotten into the habit of saving. My sons didn't seem to know I had money when I bought the house, and both were surprised. I won't be a bother to you too. I can take care of myself. To this, Rocky said to me,
Mom, I have my own family now and can't take care of you. You need to act your age and not be a bother, okay?
Are these the words of a son I struggled to raise? More than sadness, I felt irritation at this moment. I won't be a bother. After all, I'm still young.
Young. Well, I won't get involved, just so you know.
Yes. Probably, Rocky is preemptively saying he won't take care of me if I get dementia or become ill. I vowed to keep my body and mind healthy. I don't want to be taken care of by someone who says such things. Rocky has always had a not-so-great personality. Joseph is the silent type who doesn't say much. Harmless, but I've had my worries, and perhaps I paid too much attention to Joseph, making Rocky the type to cause trouble. It was cute when they were kids, but it's pathetic for an adult to keep saying unnecessary things. I wonder how he even got married. When he first said he wanted to marry someone, I almost cried. I was happy that someone would marry such a son. The first time Rocky brought home the woman who would become his wife. Nice to meet you. My name is Ava. Ava was already looking around the house before greeting. At that time, we were living in a small apartment. It was quite old but well maintained, and I thought it was fine, but Ava's impression was different.
Really, just as you said, an old house.
I couldn't believe my ears. To say such a thing when becoming part of the family was shocking. However, Rocky, without reprimanding her, just laughed.
That's why I said, let's greet quickly and go back. Wait a minute. I've prepared a meal. No way. We can't eat in such a dirty place. We came here because you wanted to at least say hello. We're not staying for a meal.
Saying this, they left. I cried eating the leftover meal alone. It felt so empty and frustrated. I couldn't understand how someone could behave like that towards me at the first meeting. I only felt anger towards Rocky for not stopping her behavior. After the wedding, Rocky and Ava completely disappeared. They must be enjoying their life, I thought. I didn't want to meet Ava after our first impression, so it was a relief. One day, I received a message that they had a child. This was truly a joy. My first grandchild. I went to the hospital immediately and was happy when I held her. It was only for a short time, but it was a happy moment. Grandchildren are special, as they say, and she truly was. Her name seems to be Vivian.
Vivian.
When I called her name, she seemed to react a little. I must live long enough to see Vivian grow up properly. I remember making that resolution in my heart. But it wasn't easy to get to see her. I should have been prepared for it, but the reality of not being allowed to see her was sad. Hearing that Ava's parents were meeting her made it even more shocking. Perhaps it's true that the parents on the woman's side are more likely to see their grandchildren. No, it's just that my relationship with my eldest son is particularly weak. But I wanted to see her at least once a year. With that slight hope, I made a call.
Please don't come today because we're going out. Then, when can I see you? It's been a year already. You don't need to see her, right? Ava's mom is enough to be Vivian's grandmother. How can you say that?
That was the first time I truly felt alone. Fortunately, I was working, so I could talk to my colleagues about it. Everyone sympathized, saying it was too harsh, and I felt rescued. One colleague advised me, now that I was alone, to forget about such a family and do things I had been holding back on. That might be a good idea. First, I wondered what to do and spent my days fretting alone at home. Then, I saw a feature on TV about someone who moved to a place rich in nature and started living a refreshed life. I decided that was it for me, switched to fully remote work, and bought a house in the suburbs. I informed my sons about it. Then, Ava showed interest and came over with Vivian. I was delighted with Vivian's unexpected visit. Changing my environment had immediately led to something good.
This place would be good for Vivian's environment too.
I felt a sense of discomfort as she said that while looking around the house. Since then, Ava started coming over frequently, asking me to look after Vivian. Florence, you're happy to see Vivian, aren't you?
Yes, but isn't it too frequent? You were so eager to see Vivian. I'm fulfilling your wish, and now you're complaining?
Rocky and Ava spoke as if leaving their child with me was for my sake. Babysitting a few times a week turned into every day. I had hoped to enjoy my alone time, but this made it impossible. I was getting sleep-deprived balancing work and babysitting.
Florence, Vivian is here today too. Ava, I think I told you yesterday, but I'm a bit sick. Oh, I have plans to meet with friends today. It's too late now. Sorry, but you'll have to take Vivian with you. It's okay, your friends will understand. How irresponsible of you to say that.
I wanted to tell them how irresponsible it was to dump babysitting on me every day, but I was too sick to argue. In the end, Ava left for her outing. And didn't come back until 10 p.m. Vivian was at an age where she wouldn't listen to me. It was really tough. That day, they came to pick her up just before 10 a.m. Taking advantage of my silence, late-night pickups became frequent. Sometimes, they even left Vivian to stay overnight.
Please, Rocky, talk to Ava. Huh? No way. After all, you seemed happy about it. I can't handle babysitting every day. I have work, you know? How selfish. You asked for this.
When did I ever wish for daily babysitting? It's a mystery. After that conversation, an incident occurred. Suddenly one morning, a moving company brought a ton of stuff.
What's going on? I didn't hear anything about moving.
We were worried about you and thought about living together with Vivian, so we decided to move. Rocky's family had decided to move in. And what audacity in their words. I firmly refused to live together, but I didn't want to trouble the movers, so we agreed to talk after the move.
It's impossible for 4 people to live here. It's fine. It's spacious enough. Besides, I like it here.
Ava sat back on the sofa as if it was her own house and said that to me. Vivian was caught between me and Ava, looking at us. So, I couldn't say anything more. I had dreamt of a free-spirited life alone, but now I was starting to live with Rocky's family. Despite being a housewife, Ava did no household chores.
"I'm busy with childcare,"
she said, making me prepare 3 meals a day. Of course, they didn't give me any money for groceries. If this continues, I'll just be doing whatever they say. Since being at home meant I'd be left with the babysitting duties, I started leaving the house early in the morning to go to work. Even though I had switched to remote work, I was commuting. "Florence, weren't you supposed to be fully remote?" "Sorry, I'm just really busy right now." It was true that I was busy with work. I had been chosen to lead a new department that was being created. After a long day of overtime, coming home past 11 p.m., something seemed off about the room. I was too tired to think much of it and headed straight to my room.
"What? This is..."
Nothing of mine was left in my room, which was now overflowing with Vivian's things. Vivian was sleeping peacefully on the bed. It's turned into Vivian's room. Standing dumbfounded at the entrance, I heard laughter. Turning around, Ava and Rocky were standing side by side, smirking at me. I couldn't grasp the situation. "Where are my things?"
"We got rid of them."
They had kept only the furniture and appliances they liked. Almost everything of mine was thrown away. Really? They hardly brought in any money. We tried selling them at a recycle shop, but were told they were in bad condition. It was embarrassing.
"The little money we got from it, we'll keep."
That's when I realized. These two had been planning to drive me out of this house from the beginning.
"You're out early in the morning and come back late. You don't need a house, do you? You're trying to kick me out? Did you just realize? Aren't you a bit slow? Or perhaps you're getting dementia? Please, don't be a nuisance to us."
This woman is a devil. How could someone do something so cruel? It's unimaginable. I gave up on staying and fighting with Ava and her cohort.
"So, I should take this as you're kicking me out?"
Yes. We'll be living here. Think of it as your last act of filial piety and leave. I hadn't received any filial piety. Why should I be the one to perform it? But I kept silent.
"Are you really okay with this? Even if I'm gone? Florence, did you think we needed you? The most you were useful for was babysitting."
The next day, I left the house as if I was being driven out. I hesitated about going to Joseph's house, but considering his reserved nature and the possibility of him cohabiting with someone, it would be unfair to burden him. Reluctantly, I decided to stay in a business hotel near my workplace. That night, Ava and Rocky apparently celebrated driving me out. "Florence, you're not thinking of doing anything strange, are you?"
"Don't worry, she's thick-skinned."
Alone in the business hotel, I pondered over my situation. The next day, I explained my circumstances to my company and took some time off. I was worried about causing trouble for my team, but my colleagues were very supportive, which comforted me.
"The house, can you transfer it into my name?"
Rocky called me with such a request right away. I was actually about to contact you about that. You're sure you want to transfer it?
Don't make me say it over and over. We talked about this when you left, didn't we? Hurry up. Understood.
I proceeded with the transfer as requested. A few days later, as expected, I received a call.
"Florence, what is this about? Are you talking about the loan? You tricked us. Let's meet and talk this over."
Tricked them? They were the ones who drove me out. Knowing a confrontation was inevitable, I headed to Ava and Rocky's place. Vivian was left with Ava's parents. They were clearly ready for a fight. "Florence, who is this person?"
"A lawyer."
I had brought a lawyer in case anything happened. Ava and Rocky were clearly surprised. Having a lawyer meant they couldn't manipulate the situation as they might have wanted. Their dismay was evident.
A lawyer? Why would you bring someone like that?
Because you might make up some false accusations. It's better for both of us to have a third party present.
Don't bring outsiders into this. If that's your attitude, then there's no point in talking. I'm leaving.
As I was about to leave, Ava nudged Rocky. Reluctantly, Rocky stopped me, and the discussion began with the lawyer present.
We didn't know there was still a loan to pay.
You drove me out, and now you're saying you didn't know.
Why are you laughing?
Ava stood up angrily. Rocky stopped her and pointed to a voice recorder on the table. Ava sat down again but glared at me the entire time. It was clear from her expression that she was furious.
The monthly payment for this house's mortgage is $1,800. Good luck paying it together. $1,800. Mom, how do you have so much money? After you two became adults, I started working more, cut down on living expenses, and began investing.
I never wanted my sons to feel poor just because they had a single mother. So, I endured personal hardships to ensure they didn't feel deprived, allowing them to do what they wanted within our means, even if we couldn't afford luxuries. That's why I honestly didn't have much savings. Then, a coworker advised me on the importance of saving for the future. Luckily, I was only 43 when I sent my sons off to college. I could work a lot. So, I started a side job, worked double, and increased my income. Once I had saved a bit, I invested it. After 10 years, I had accumulated a significant amount. After my sons were independent, I decided to use the money I earned for myself and boldly took out a mortgage to buy a house, only to have it taken from me.
Now that I've already transferred the ownership, you two will be responsible for the remaining mortgage payments. Since you took it upon yourselves to take over, it's your responsibility. That's not logical.
Ava's face turned red with rage. Then, the lawyer explained that I had no obligation to pay, and that disposing of someone's property could be a crime. He also mentioned that if they insisted on making me pay for a mortgage I wasn't living under, they could face legal action for that too. Rocky and Ava, not well versed in the law, started to panic. Clearly, they didn't want to go to court. We understand. We'll figure out the mortgage on our own. Please don't sue us.
Good, as long as you understand.
Ava grimaced in frustration.
By doing this, you're no longer a mother or anything to us. Don't ever show your face to us again.
Rocky hurled those words at me in a rage. Since moving out, I hadn't seen much of my son anyway. After all the unpleasantness and being driven out, I had no feelings left for Rocky. Feeling relieved at the thought of not having to see their faces again, I said,
I have no desire to see you again either, so this works out for me.
Rocky looked surprised when I said that, probably thinking I would never abandon him.
This wasn't supposed to happen.
I heard Rocky's voice as I left through the front door. Months later, Ava called to apologize. Florence, I'm so sorry. Please come back. We can't possibly afford the payments.
Even if you apologize, I'm not coming back. I've moved to a new house.
Where is it? Can I come now? I couldn't help but laugh. What is this woman so desperate for?
Ava, do you really think I'd tell you where I am?
Please. We're going to be bankrupt at this rate. That's not my problem. Besides, Ava could just work. It's wrong to rely on someone else without working yourself.
You could work.
I have started working. But then Rocky got fired.
What? Why?
That surprised me. According to Ava, Rocky had been working late for overtime pay. One day, he stole money from a coworker's wallet while they were in the bathroom. "Please don't report me to the police," Rocky had begged his coworker. Even though it was just $50, the coworker didn't file a police report, but did report it to their boss, resulting in Rocky's dismissal. Ava was furious that Rocky had jeopardized their future.
What are you doing for just $50? Just work yourself. I am part-time. Get a full-time job. I have a child. Part-time work is more flexible.
They apparently argue like this almost daily. With Rocky unemployed, the mortgage payments weren't waiting. "I'm terrified of the payment due dates. I feel like I'm losing my mind."
And you think it's okay to ask for help from someone you kicked out? You told me never to show my face again. So, I can't help you.
That was just something Rocky said in the heat of the moment.
Words said in haste can have irreversible consequences.
Ava fell silent. She seemed to be crying. She sounded truly desperate. "But I have no obligation to help. I can become a devil too. Sorry, but please don't contact me again. If you do, I'll block your number." I said that and unilaterally ended the call. It was right after that. As I was leaving the office for lunch with my colleagues, Ava, Rocky, and Vivian were standing there. My colleagues quickly noticed and showed their concern for me. "Go ahead without me," I told my colleagues and approached the three of them. "What do you want?" I was surprised at how cold my own voice sounded. Then Rocky began to apologize deeply.
"Stop this, not here."
I took the three of them to a nearby bench. I didn't want Vivian to see her father apologizing so deeply to her grandmother. "I was wrong. Please, help us." "One thing, didn't you say never to show up again?" "That was." Rocky's ears turned red, likely from the shame of his actions, and damaging his own pride.
"No need to apologize anymore. Just don't ever appear in front of me again."
"Am I not your son anymore?"
"I don't consider you my son anymore. That's too harsh. Florence, that's really harsh."
"Do you have the right to judge me?" Ava fell silent. After being ridiculed, treated as a nuisance, used, and driven out by my own son, I couldn't think of him as my son anymore. I realized they didn't understand how much they had hurt me. Explaining it to them would be pointless. They wouldn't recognize the abnormality of their actions. It's better to let them face the consequences of their actions.
"You're still Vivian's grandmother, right?"
I expected this kind of turn when they brought Vivian. Vivian is innocent. But if being involved meant being used like this, I decided to give up on Vivian. Using Vivian won't work. "I won't extend my hand to you again, nor will I meet you. I plan to live in a different world now."
"But you said you wanted to see Vivian." "Don't use Vivian. Solve your own problems. You brought this on yourselves. Are you okay being alone?"
That must have been Rocky's last attempt. But I'm not alone anymore. I noticed my colleagues had come back and were standing behind me.
"If I didn't have them, I couldn't have done anything about this situation. I'm not alone, so I'm strong."
Let's stop this. Rocky. I'm embarrassed. Rocky hung his head weakly. Ava, pulling Vivian's hand, left Rocky behind and walked away. Well, our lunch break is almost over, so we're going. Goodbye. Leaving Rocky behind, I left with my colleagues. Rocky seemed to stand there in a daze for a while, but was eventually escorted off the premises by security. Eventually, Rocky and Ava couldn't make the mortgage payments and fell behind. Ignoring the demand letters led to the financial institution demanding immediate full repayment. Panicked, Rocky and Ava consulted with the financial institution. The house was put up for auction. Due to its location, it didn't sell for the desired price. Maybe because I had customized it to my liking, which might have limited its appeal. Desperate to sell, Ava lowered the price on her own. It sold for about half of what it was purchased for. This left them with a substantial debt to pay off.
What have you done? You did this without consulting me. I thought it was better to sell it quickly. Why do you always act without thinking? This is why I can't stand people who haven't worked in society. What? I'm taking care of the child. If you helped a bit, I could work too.
Eventually, they were left with a large debt and no home. Their credit cards stopped working, and they couldn't get new ones. Unable to rent a house, they temporarily stayed with Ava's parents, who kicked them out because Ava didn't contribute to the household or work, using childcare as an excuse. Somehow, Ava's father managed to get them an old apartment, but a tough life awaited them. Ava's family refused to help any further. Ava's father even said not to come back until they had paid off their debts. Vivian ended up being taken care of at Ava's parents' house. I was worried about Vivian, so hearing that brought me relief. With Vivian gone and needing to work, Ava looked for jobs but couldn't find anything. So she ended up cleaning bathrooms at a shopping mall. There, she accidentally ran into a friend from her school days and was laughed at, leading to a humiliating experience. Ava came home crying, and Rocky's cold attitude only added to her stress. Rocky and Ava fought almost every day, often getting scolded by their neighbors because of the noise. Both of them actually wanted a divorce, but Rocky couldn't afford to lose his home, and Ava couldn't handle the debt repayment on her own. When they looked into divorce once, they found an article saying debts could be divided, which made them give up on the idea. Ava had no one to consult with, so she relied on internet articles. These messages were left on my mobile phone's voicemail. After they contacted me again, I decided to block their numbers. Rocky and Ava are still burdened with a huge debt, working every day for repayment. They must regret taking over my house, but it's too late for regrets now. As for me, after staying in a hotel for a few days, I received a call from Joseph out of the blue. He had moved and was calling to give me his new address. When I told him about what had happened for the first time, he was very upset that I hadn't consulted him and invited me to stay at his place. What surprised me was how spacious it was. I knew Joseph had started a business, but I wasn't aware of the details. The company had grown enough to afford a house without me realizing. Now, I'm enjoying my time living with Joseph. He's about to get married, so I'll have to move out. But he surprised me by gifting me a house next to his. He apologized for it being a small house. But I loved the design, it was exactly to my taste. I never knew you understood me so well. I was moved because I thought the reticent Joseph wasn't interested in me. A few days later, I met his fiancée, who was wonderful. She welcomed me living next door. They also welcomed me to live next door. Actually, it was her idea to build the house next to theirs. I'm looking forward to my new home and the new family next door. Even though I lost Rocky, experiencing Joseph's kindness has made me happy. One day, 6 months after Jane, who married into a family of doctors, started living with her in-laws, I was relaxing in the living room when I received a call on my mobile phone, which I had left nearby. It had been a while since I last saw Jane's name pop up on my screen once or twice a month, and I hurried to answer the call.
Jane? Hello? Can you hear me? What happened? Not contacting me for half a year?
Mom, help me.
With a voice so frail it seemed squeezed out, that's all she said before I heard something fall on the other side of the phone.
What? Jane? Jane? Where are you now? At Susan's house?
I'm so starving, I can't take it anymore. I want to see Tom and Emma. Mom and Dad.
I barely made out her choppy voice. It was clear she must have dropped the phone, and her voice faded away. As I was getting agitated, my husband Jim, who had been working from home, came down from the second floor. What's wrong? A call from Jane?
Jim! Jane is in danger!
Jim immediately grabbed his car keys and wallet and dashed out, and I hurried into the car while keeping the line open.
Jane, wait! We're coming now!
Despite the early spring chill, we forgot to turn on the car's heater as we rushed over. Upon arriving at my daughter's in-laws, Jim and I pushed our way inside somewhat forcefully. There we found Jane, lying weakly. My name is Mary, 55 years old. I'm a housewife living with my husband Jim, who is a year older than me. Jim and I met through a mutual college friend's introduction. We discovered we both loved movies while having dinner with friends, and hit it off right then and there. Since then, we've watched various genres of movies together, from action to romantic comedies and horror, and reminiscing about discussing our thoughts over meals remains a fond memory. After dating for about a year, we got married. Jim joined a company after graduating from college and has been working there ever since. Now, with retirement looming, he often muses over a drink about how we might spend our time. Maybe it wouldn't be so bad to live a quiet life in the countryside now that Jane has moved out. Jane is our daughter. She was conceived soon after we got married, and despite a difficult birth, she was born safely and has grown up well. I once told Jane about the time when she was born. I shared how the nurses took care of Jane on my behalf, how they made sure I wasn't burdened, and how they helped me. Hearing this, Jane seemed to realize the importance and preciousness of her own life and her mother's life, and she declared she wanted to become a nurse. I want to be a nurse and support babies being born and women like Mom. She was still in middle school but soon started attending a cram school and quickly made it into a selective high school. From there, she relentlessly pursued a career in nursing through high school and college, her determination both heartening and bittersweet for me to watch. Jim felt the same way, and when our only daughter decided to live alone upon entering university, he strongly opposed it.
No way! What if she gets involved with some weird guy? There are suspicious people out there these days. That kind of person is always around. Jim, don't be such a helicopter parent. I hate the idea of her commuting to university by train.
The argument between me and Jane and my husband was truly stressful, but eventually, Jane started living on her own. The night Jane left, only I knew that Jim quietly cried over his drink. Jane spent her university breaks working part-time jobs and coming home. Her innate cheerfulness and positive attitude toward challenges surely guided her on her path to becoming a nurse. Remembering this, I also enjoy a drink with Jim.
That's true. Maybe somewhere known for its local craft beer would be nice?
That sounds good, but Jane complains when we drink too much. Jim says with a wry smile. Jane completed her training, passed the national licensing exam, and became a nurse. Then, unexpectedly, she announced she was getting married. The man's name was Tom, someone she met during her training. Tom had finished his medical training, proposed to Jane, and she accepted.
It's been a while since I proposed, but I'm happy to meet you today. I want to build a happy home with her. Please allow us to get married.
Jim and I were taken aback by the sudden news, but seeing his handsome and straightforward demeanor, I thought he seemed sincere. Predictably, Jim was visibly shocked but weakly consented to the marriage. I see. Jim must have seen how well Jane and Tom suited each other, unable to object when he saw Jane smiling happily beside him. Though he didn't cry that night, he definitely shed tears at the wedding. Tom's family comes from a line of doctors, with his father also a doctor, still working at a nearby hospital. He was cheerful and kind towards Jane, but it seemed that Jane didn't quite get along with her Maëlle, Susan and Ciel, Anne. I overheard Jane on the phone once, saying,
"They accuse me of being after their money. Saying I became a nurse just because it pays well and such mean things. Why? Because I come from an ordinary family. It's really rude."
But you and Tom are doing well, right?
Yeah. Sometimes we can't see each other because of my night shifts, but I'm still working too, so it's mutual. We both have the same time off next, so we're going to the beach.
Her voice brightened as she spoke, making me happy and reminding me of my own early days of marriage. Thinking this must be the happiest time for her, I said,
"Have fun,"
and hung up the phone. It's still fresh in my memory when Jane and Tom's daughter, Emma, was born. Named Emma, both Jim and I were delighted every time we received photos of our granddaughter.
"Jane's beauty has passed on to her. Her nose is just like Jane's."
Following Emma's birth, Jane became a full-time housewife, busy with household chores and childcare every day. However, not everything was joyful. Around Emma's second birthday, Tom's father passed away. Tom shed frustrated tears at the funeral. He was sick. It shocked me he kept it from me, but I think he must have been prepared. That day, the cold rain quietly soaked all the relatives gathered. After the funeral settled down, Susan proposed living together to Tom. "We have spare rooms, and it's lonely by myself. I also want to see my granddaughter Emma." Tom and Jane hadn't considered living with his parents. "We don't have to live together." Tom declined initially, but Susan brought up the idea every time they met. Living together would save on rent. Plus, it would bring you a bit closer to Jane's parents, right? Indeed, Susan's house was only a few minutes away by car from ours. Jane and Tom lived closer to Tom's hospital, away from both our houses. Thinking of having a second child and the possibility of getting some help with childcare, Jane and Tom accepted Susan's proposal to live together. When Jane told me this over the phone, I felt a bit anxious.
"But aren't you and Susan and not getting along so well? Are you sure it's going to be okay?"
And is living by herself in an apartment nearby, so it's just Susan at home, and it will be fine. I'll manage. With that, Jane started her life living with her in-laws. However, Anne, who was supposed to be living in an apartment, was always at the in-laws' house, not working, and just living day by day. "Jane, long time no see," greeted Anne, seemingly tipsy from drinking during the day. "And weren't you living on your own?" Jane asked, to which she laughed. "Is it so strange that I'm at my parents' house? I'm job hunting, so it's fine to be here for a bit." "Oh, Mary, can you make something to eat?" "Something simple is fine." However, there seemed to be no sign that she was actually looking for a job afterward. I was curious about how she was managing her apartment rent, but it appeared Susan was sending her money to cover it every month. Jane became anxious about the future, and her fears soon materialized. "Jane, as the wife in this house, you need to work hard. Start with cleaning, laundry. And of course, cooking daily meals is a given for a housewife." That's how Susan's harassment began. When Jane cleaned or did the laundry, Susan would complain about every little thing, like not wringing the rag properly or hanging shirts incorrectly.
"Jane, this is how you fold clothes,"
she would sometimes instruct.
"I know how to do it."
"But your way is like this." "It's completely different," Susan would insist, although Jane couldn't see any difference, so she let it go. Regarding cooking, Susan would complain about the seasoning being too strong.
"I only eat food that's delicately seasoned and light,"
she claimed, even going so far as to throw away soup Jane had made. After living like this for a while, and also started harassing Jane, finding any opportunity to complain.
"Jane, the bath isn't ready." "It's still daytime, you're taking a bath now?" "I can take it whenever I want, can't I?" "You're so slow, Jane."
Such was the situation. That's the situation as I understood it, from Jane's phone calls and messages, but gradually, she complained less, and I thought maybe she was getting used to living with her in-laws. However, suddenly, Jane's communications stopped. She used to call once or twice a month, but then there was nothing. I tried calling several times, but often couldn't get through. When I finally did, Jane's voice sounded forcedly cheerful.
"I'm fine. Don't worry,"
she said. It made me even more worried, but I didn't want to interfere too much, so I didn't press further. Occasionally, I still received some contact from her.
"Why don't you come back here for a bit? I'll talk to Susan. Come back with Emma."
Jane would decline with a tired but cheerful laugh. Issues with in-laws happen in every family, right? I'm dealing with it, so don't worry.
"Jane, are you really okay? Your voice sounds hoarse."
"Oh, just a little cold." Her awkward response made me feel uneasy. "I should go. I need to prepare dinner." Jane hurriedly ended the call. After that, I tried contacting her several times, but I got no response from Jane, nor did my messages got read. One night, while having a drink with Jim, I brought up that Jane had been acting strangely lately. Maybe it's just a coincidence? Wasn't she just sick with a cold?
I wonder if it really was a cold. She always said colds hit her in the nose, but I didn't hear her sniffling at all.
Then we have no choice but to go directly to Susan's house and check on her ourselves. That weekend, Jim and I actually visited Susan's house. When we rang the doorbell, Jane came out to greet us, and we were happy to see her again after several months. Her face, though, seemed thinner than before, and her smile quickly turned to darkness. When Susan and appeared behind her.
"What is this? Showing up unannounced. Don't you have any common sense?"
Poor Jane, raised by such people. And said with a laugh, but Susan, without reprimanding her, was desperate to get us off the property.
"Please leave. I'll call the police for trespassing if you don't."
Susan, furiously trying to shoo us away with a broom, was visibly angry. Despite being chased off, Jim and I returned to our car, feeling that something was wrong.
Was Jane always that thin? She used to complain about gaining a little weight.
Is she not being fed properly? Could it be abuse?
Is that even possible?
We went to the police to discuss our concerns, but were told that without seeing Jane or witnessing abuse, they couldn't do anything.
It'll be too late if we wait until something happens.
I insisted, but Jim stopped me, and we went home for the day. Half a year passed in this state when one day, as I was relaxing in the living room, my mobile phone rang with a call from Jane. I hurried to answer it.
"Jane? Hello? Can you hear me? What happened, not contacting me for half a year?"
Mom." Jane's voice was a weak groan. "Help me." After saying just that in a weakened voice, I heard something fall.
"What? Jane? Jane? Where are you now?" At Susan's house?
I'm so starving, I can't take it anymore. I want to see Tom and Emma. Mom and Dad. I barely made out her choppy voice. She must have dropped the phone, and her voice faded away. As I was getting agitated, Jim, who had been working from home, came down from the second floor. What's wrong? A call from Jane?
Jim! Jane is in danger!
Jim immediately grabbed his car keys and wallet, and I hurried into the car while keeping the line open.
Jane, wait! We're coming now!
Forgetting to turn on the car's heater in the slight chill, we rushed over. When we rang Susan's house's doorbell, Susan came out and was startled to see us.
You two again.
Expecting to be turned away again, we entered the house before Susan could finish speaking. Who is it? One night, slightly tipsy and blocked our way, but Jim and I pushed past her and proceeded inside without hesitation.
Jane! Where are you, Jane? You're here, right? And Emma? We have to take Emma back too. Emma?
Susan and followed us, but we didn't care.
What's the meaning of this? Stop it, enough.
While I was calling for Emma, she noticed the commotion and came out. I'm here.
Good. Where's Mom? Do you know where she is?
Over there. Emma led us with her small steps to Jane's room. Along the way, Mom looking forward to seeing Grandma and Grandpa, Emma said. Puzzled, we followed her and arrived in front of a locked storage room. It was a simple lock added afterward, and Jim and I broke in.
Jane!
I screamed. Jane was lying weakly inside, her cheeks hollow, her limbs thin, clearly not having eaten for days. Jane couldn't respond, only occasionally moaning weakly.
I'm calling for an ambulance.
You're overreacting. I attended to Jane while Jim called the police and ambulance. After the call, Jim confronted Susan.
Why would you do this?
The answer came not from Susan or Anne, but from Emma standing nearby. It's discipline, she said.
Discipline? This isn't discipline.
Soon the ambulance arrived, and Jim and I explained to the paramedics that Jane was too weak to speak, had been left in the storage, and likely hadn't eaten properly. Sensing the severity from Jane's frail condition, a paramedic said, Understood. We'll transport her to the hospital immediately, and asked me to accompany them.
Wait! Her husband is a doctor. He works at...
I mentioned the hospital name, asking if they could take her there. The paramedics contacted the hospital, and fortunately, they agreed to accept her, so the ambulance quickly set off. Siren blaring towards the hospital. Arriving at the hospital, Tom, having been informed of the emergency admission, was waiting, and I confronted him in a near frenzy.
What have you done?
Confused, Tom was approached by nurses trying to separate us. Amidst the commotion, with people watching, I didn't hold back in telling Tom about Jane's condition.
I will never forgive this. Please wait. This is the first time I'm hearing of this. I thought she seemed a bit off lately, but she always laughed it off, saying she was fine.
Tom often stayed away from home overnight due to night shifts and helping at associated hospitals, so he rarely saw Jane and had left her care entirely to Susan and Anne. Eventually, Jane had to be hospitalized for a while. Tom, angry at himself for not noticing and at Susan and Anne for their actions, informed Jane's doctor of the seriousness of the situation and decided to call the police. The next day, when Jim visited Jane's hospital room, she was able to speak, though she looked painfully frail with an 4 drip. Regretting not taking her out of that house sooner and apologizing for not noticing her situation. We listened as Jane recounted everything. It started with verbal abuse and escalated to taking away her mobile phone and computer, becoming increasingly malicious. Yet Jane, with her inherent brightness and positivity, tried to endure, smiling at Tom whenever he came home late or after a long absence. However, this seemed to irritate Susan and Anne, whose harassment escalated when Tom was frequently away at night shifts or training sessions. Jane didn't seek Tom's help because Susan had threatened her not to tell.
If I said anything, they'd bully Emma.
Indeed, there were instances where Emma was pinched on the cheek or deliberately not given food. Jane had reportedly pleaded,
"I'll endure it, so please don't hurt Emma,"
asking them not to lay a hand on Emma. For 6 months, Jane and Emma were separated, with Jane only receiving food and water once a day and kept in a storage room otherwise. Jane attempted to escape once but was caught by and at the entrance and severely beaten, making further escape attempts impossible. Fortunately, she had managed to keep an old mobile phone and charger hidden, which was not taken from her. Jane documented everything that happened, including daily abuses, in videos and messages at night.
"Where is it?" "Under the bed in the storage room where I was."
Based on this information, the police later recovered the evidence. The police, using this evidence, arrested Susan and Anne for imprisoning Jane over a long period. This incident caused Jim to lose trust in Tom, and for the time being, Emma would stay with Jim and me.
"We can't let Emma suffer the same fate as Jane. We'll be watching you closely from now on." "Yes. I'm sorry. I won't make excuses for not realizing the terrible things my mother and were doing to Jane while I was away."
Tom deeply apologized. As for Jane, since her hospitalization, she gradually recovered both physically and mentally. Each visit to the hospital showed her cheeks becoming fuller, and she laughed happily about gaining weight on her upper arms. She was discharged about 3 months later, into the warm sunlight that felt a bit too bright. After her discharge, Jane returned to her parents' home, where she, Jim, Jane, and Emma began living together. We had assumed she would certainly divorce after such an ordeal, but after Emma had gone to bed one night, Jane said something unexpected. "You know, I'm not thinking about getting a divorce." Jim and I were shocked. Perhaps seeing our confusion, Jane slowly explained. "At first, I was fed up with Susan and thought about divorcing him. But Tom was always kind and warm." During her hospital stay, Tom visited her daily after work, apologizing on behalf of his mother and sister, and promised never to let such a thing happen again. "I will protect you," he assured. He also worked to ensure Susan and were punished by gathering evidence at home and getting his colleagues to write thorough medical reports. Tom talked about cutting ties with his family and said he'd follow any conditions my parents said until they could forgive him, Jane said.
"Do you believe him?"
"I do. That's why I really want to live with Tom and Emma again." Jane looked directly into Jim's eyes as she spoke, her words and expression showing no doubt. However, Jim and I couldn't easily accept this and told Tom that we opposed the idea of Jane and Emma living with him for the time being, even after arranging a meeting to discuss it. Surprisingly, Tom accepted our stipulation without argument.
"I understand both Jane's and your feelings. I've done something unforgivable and will accept any punishment until I can live with Jane and Emma again."
Later, Jim retired, and we moved to the countryside with Jane and Emma. Something we had talked about doing after retirement, but never expected to happen so soon.
"Isn't this a bit hasty?"
I asked Jim before moving, but he shook his head.
"I can't settle down knowing their house is nearby."
Meanwhile, the young couple continued to persuade Jim to let them live as a family again. Desperate for approval, Tom heard from Jane about a closed clinic in our new town and immediately came to check it out. It was a small clinic, previously run by an elderly doctor specializing in internal medicine and pulmonology, retiring due to age. The clinic was conveniently located near a bus stop and had good access to the train station, with most facilities already in place. Tom, who had specialized in internal medicine, decided to leave his previous hospital, purchased the closed clinic, and successfully opened his own practice. At the clinic, Jane returned to work as a nurse, starting her days early and working reduced hours so she could be home by the evening. The clinic is so close to home that it's only a 5-minute drive away. On the clinic's days off, Tom comes over, and we spend time dining and playing with Emma, Jane, and me. Jim still keeps a stern eye on Tom, but lately, he's started to watch over him more gently. I hope for a reconciliation between Jim and them soon and showcase my cooking skills on weekends. "How's it going lately?" Jim asks gruffly, but his voice carries a hint of kindness.
It's nice being with Jane and Emma. And being able to drink with Jim.
Don't get too comfortable. Jim and Tom have even started to enjoy a drink together in the evenings.
Grandma, this is Mia.
Kevin's girlfriend, Mia, seemingly quiet woman with fair skin, greeted us with a nervous smile. I quickly ushered them inside the house. It was for a meet and greet that Kevin had brought her over, and my daughter-in-law, Chloe, was in good spirits, eagerly asking how the two had met.
Evelyn, hurry up and serve them some coffee.
Chloe's mood had soured just minutes earlier. The reason was Kevin had first told his parents that Mia was pregnant. I was so shocked I lost my voice. Chloe showed some discomfort at the fact they were having a shotgun wedding.
We're serious about making this work. We know we're young, but please, allow us to marry.
Both were sincerely asking for their parents' permission to marry. As a grandmother, I realized it was not my place to comment and silently watched, moved by their demeanor. However, Chloe made a visibly displeased face and waved her hand in front of her own face.
A shotgun wedding is so tacky. Just because you're pregnant doesn't mean you have to marry, right? Isn't that right, Evelyn?
Suddenly turned to me.
What?
I let out, as Chloe directed a sardonic smile my way.
Yes, it's true. Just because there's a baby on the way doesn't necessarily mean marriage is a must.
Kevin looked momentarily saddened. I had anticipated such a reaction. But you two are choosing to move forward because of this baby. Whatever the case, it's something Kevin and Mia have decided together. No one else has the right to object. Maybe what we can do, Chloe, is to support them, don't you think?
Chloe downed her mug of coffee in one go.
Evelyn, get me a refill, please. She handed it over, then crossed her arms and sighed.
Well, opposing it is futile anyway. So, when are you planning the wedding? What? Oh, considering Mia's condition, we'd like to do it sooner rather than later. So, this means we're finally getting a break from parenting.
Chloe said reflectively, then turned towards me in the kitchen. Now that we're going to be living as a family, we won't be needing a housekeeper anymore. Can you leave?
What?
The sudden words from Chloe took everyone by surprise. My son Charles, Kevin, and Mia were all left speechless.
What am I supposed to do now?
My name is Evelyn. I'm a 70-year-old grandmother. I live with my only son Charles, his wife Chloe, and their family in a 2-generation home. Though it may seem happy from the outside, I've felt somewhat downcast since losing my husband a few years ago. Chloe, my son's wife, is outspoken and tends to say whatever comes to her mind, and while we're not on bad terms, I've felt her using me for convenience. When Chloe goes out with friends, she takes for granted that I'll do the household chores and even asks me to drive her to the station. Chloe seems to think living together in a two-generation home is her way of showing filial piety. Contrary to my wish for a quiet life after my husband's death, I find myself entangled in a complicated situation.
Come on, get up already.
From the bedroom of my son and his wife, Chloe's almost shrieking voice can be heard. She seems to be in a bad mood again. Though Charles was working till late last night, he was woken up at the usual time on his day off and hurried to get ready to go out. I quietly spoke to Charles when I encountered him in the washroom. "Charles, are you okay?" "I'm fine, got about 5 hours of sleep." Charles smiled gently at me through the mirror while drying his face with a towel. Lately, Charles has been looking pale, and I've been worried. Despite my concerns, Charles would brush it off with, "I'm fine," which was something my husband used to say. He kept working until one day, he suddenly collapsed and passed away. That memory is always with me, and I wish Charles could rest more on his days off. Loud footsteps approached. Chloe appears at the bathroom, frowning and visibly annoyed.
How long are you going to wash your face? Hurry up, I'll be late for my meeting with friends.
"I'm sorry, I'll change right away." The meek Charles quickly left to change his clothes. Meanwhile, Chloe turned to me and handed over a note.
"Evelyn, this is the shopping list for today."
"Yes, I got it. Have fun with your friends.
The weather seems nice today.
Please wash the bed sheets as well." Chloe left without waiting for my reply. After watching her brazen departure, I sighed deeply. Even when my husband was alive, Chloe had always been bold in speaking her mind to us. In the beginning of our living together, "Don't hold back," I had said to Chloe, but as time went on, her aggressive nature became more apparent. Cooking, which Chloe disliked, fell to me. If she disliked a dish, she would push the plate away saying,
"I told you I can't eat this, didn't I?"
Or she would complain about wrinkles in the laundry I had folded. Still, since she was chosen by my son Charles, I tried to keep a quiet smile and avoid causing trouble, but since my husband passed, Chloe's attitude has become more extreme, tiring my spirit.
"Evelyn, you're staying home all day, right? Make sure the bath is ready for me when I get back."
Chloe said this without even looking at me as she left the house. Chloe goes out with her friends almost every week. Since the beginning of her marriage, she has seldom done housework or childcare, focusing more on her appearance and spending freely. She's very sociable, making acquaintances in various places. There were many instances that could have led to suspicions of infidelity when Chloe was younger, but Charles, she wouldn't do that. Trusted her without a doubt, so I didn't pursue it. I was surprised to see Charles, looking sleepy as he entered with his hands full of confectionery boxes upon returning from seeing off Chloe. "Oh, this? It's for Chloe's class reunion next week. She's planning to give them out."
"Really? All of this?"
Chloe doesn't want to be embarrassed. She keeps saying she doesn't want people to think we're living with our parents because we're struggling for money. I'm sorry, but just let her do as she pleases. Of course, it's all right, don't worry. Sitting in the chair, I felt an overwhelming sense of exhaustion. Eventually, I took the list Chloe had given me and went out for the shopping. My familiar shoes felt heavier than usual. Perhaps due to my age, I often feel a dull pain in my knees with every step. Yet, imagining Chloe's likely snide remarks about wasting gas, I gently stroked my knees, encouraging them to keep going. Returning home, sweating and carrying shopping bags in both hands, I set down the bags at the entrance and stretched my bent back when my grandson Kevin appeared. "Oh, Grandma, welcome back. No wonder you weren't home, you went out shopping." Kevin frowned slightly as he looked at the groceries I had bought. Kevin, the only son of Charles and Chloe, had become less visible around the house since starting his job last spring. Though we live together, he's often busy with work, coming home late and leaving early in the morning. And on his days off, he dresses up and goes out. It's rare for Kevin to be at home during the daytime on a weekend. Before I could even take off my shoes, Kevin took the shopping bags to the kitchen and began putting things away quickly. I glimpsed his expression and sensed a happy atmosphere.
Did something good happen?
Kevin smiled as he carefully placed eggs from a carton into the refrigerator.
Actually, there's someone I want to introduce to you. I'm thinking of bringing her home next week.
Introduce someone? As I processed what that meant, I realized my grandson had reached the age for such things. Introduce someone? Could it be what I'm thinking? It might be. Grandma, there's something I've been thinking about for a long time. Something you've been thinking about? Yes. I can't talk about it just yet, but I promise I will someday. But first, would you meet the person I want to introduce? Kevin spoke with excitement, and I couldn't help but smile. I was curious about what he had been thinking about, but more so about the kind of woman he would bring home. Growing up, Kevin had never brought a girlfriend home. His absence from home since starting his job, I realized, might have been due to dating. For the first time in a while, I forgot about the usual annoyances and hummed a tune while cleaning. Of course, I had informed Chloe and Charles about this matter, but Charles only muttered, "Marriage, huh?" while Chloe seemed unamused. On their next day off, Kevin brought the woman he wanted to introduce to our home. Chloe had asked me to clean up the front of the house, and while I was sprinkling water, I became a bit wary when an unfamiliar car stopped, but seeing my grandson waving from the driver's seat with a smile, I felt relieved. The car was a rental. Perhaps Kevin had gone to the trouble of renting a car to pick her up. I almost laughed inwardly, thinking Kevin must be quite smitten.
Grandma! This is Mia!
I couldn't help but smile at the sight of my grandson's happy face as he introduced the woman next to him. Kevin's girlfriend, Mia, seemingly quiet woman with fair skin, greeted us with a nervous smile. I quickly led the two inside. It was for a meet and greet that Kevin had brought her over, and Chloe, in a good mood, eagerly asked how the two had become acquainted. Chloe and Charles sat at a table set for four, facing Kevin and Mia, while I prepared coffee for everyone in the kitchen.
Evelyn, hurry up and serve them some coffee!
Chloe's mood had turned sour just minutes before. The reason was that Kevin had first told his parents that Mia was pregnant. I was so shocked I lost my voice. The previously warm atmosphere froze in an instant, with Kevin showing a seriousness which he usually does not. Chloe displayed some discomfort at the fact they were having a shotgun wedding.
We're serious about making this work. We might be young, but please, allow us to marry.
Both were earnestly asking their parents' permission to marry. As a grandmother, I realized it was not my place to comment and silently watched, moved by their demeanor. Watching Kevin plead before his parents, I felt tears welling up. Of course, we support your marriage. For the baby's sake, it's better to marry soon and settle down mentally.
Thanks, Dad,
Kevin said with a smile, looking at Mia. Chloe made a visibly displeased face and waved her hand in front of her own face.
Shotgun weddings are so tacky. Can you even explain how this happened, Mia?
Taken aback by such an unexpected question, Mia was surprised.
What?
And looked down at the table. Kevin quickly placed his hand on her shoulder. Times have changed, this kind of marriage isn't unusual anymore. Besides, we have our own ways of thinking and are ready to work hard.
Kevin, you offered to marry because Mia got pregnant, didn't you? Are you sure this is a well-thought-out decision? Our relationship was serious from the start, aiming for marriage. It just happened that the baby gave us a good opportunity. Just because there's a baby doesn't mean you have to marry, right? Isn't that right, Evelyn?
Chloe suddenly turned to me.
What?
I let out, as Chloe directed a sardonic smile my way. Recalling a TV segment on single mothers we watched as a family recently, indeed. Having a baby doesn't necessarily lead to marriage, but this situation seemed different. Yes, it's true.
Just because there's a baby on the way doesn't mean marriage is a must.
Kevin looked momentarily saddened. I had anticipated such a reaction. So, I had prepared my next words carefully, thinking I'd proudly tell Kevin about it later. But, you two are choosing to move forward because of this baby. Whatever the case, it's a decision made by Kevin and Mia together. No one else has the right to object. Maybe what we can do, Chloe, is to support them, don't you think?
An old person making irresponsible statements.
What would she say next? Everyone probably wondered, but Chloe downed her mug of coffee in one go.
Evelyn, get me a refill, please.
She handed it over, then crossed her arms and sighed.
Well, opposing it is futile anyway. So, when are you planning the wedding? What? Oh, considering Mia's condition, we'd like to do it sooner rather than later. So, this means we're finally getting a break from parenting.
Chloe said wistfully, then turned to face me, who was standing in the kitchen.
Since the family will be living together from now on, can we ask you, the no longer needed housekeeper, to leave? What? My son is getting married, and we want to live with just our cherished family from now on.
Charles, taken aback by Chloe's sudden words, and both Kevin and Mia were left speechless in shock.
Once Kevin's child is born, they'll likely live here for a while, right? We don't want to trouble you with the baby's night crying.
No, I'm fine with that. If there's anything I can do.
I can't think of any advantage to living with someone who's likely to become a care-dependent elderly. You're no longer needed, so could you please leave?
Feeling as if my heart was being torn out, I didn't want to worry Kevin and the others, so
You're absolutely right.
Tried to smile bravely. At that time, I didn't take Chloe's words seriously. But day by day, Chloe's efforts to drive me out of the house became more blatant. Please leave as soon as possible. She kept on saying so. When I consulted with Charles, the timid man could only hold his head and stay silent. What was especially shocking was the realization that Chloe was almost entirely in control of the inheritance from my husband, including the house. My husband, being a man of small desires, had left everything to our son Charles with the intention that all his property would be passed on to him. Effectively, I had no assets or property of my own. And since Charles was under Chloe's thumb, I was stunned to find myself stripped of both my home and inheritance.
What should I do now?
I murmured while looking through old albums of my late husband and I in the middle of the night. He was always gentle, never angry, just calm. Was it his nature that allowed Chloe to become so selfish? If so, I felt like the cause was both my husband and myself. Months passed. Despite the daily harassment from Chloe, unable to leave, I lived enduring it all. One day, while I was taking a shower, the water suddenly turned cold. I worried it was broken, but it seemed Chloe had turned off the water heater's power. Thinking she probably didn't know I was in the bath, I turned the power back on, but it was immediately turned off again. Realizing it was harassment.
Could you not turn off the power while I'm bathing?
I asked.
It's a waste of electricity.
Only to be shouted at. There were even times in the dead of winter when I had to rinse off with cold water. Exhausted, I consulted Charles.
Could you bathe while Chloe is out?
But he could only weakly suggest. Wondering how he became so spineless, I sighed in disbelief. Even as Chloe said with a snide smile every time we met,
"Please rent an apartment and live there as soon as possible."
I was powerless to do anything. Amidst these oppressive days, a piece of bright news was brought in. Mia had finally given birth to a healthy baby. For a moment, Chloe and I celebrated wholeheartedly, tears in our eyes as we laughed together.
"Now, if only you'd leave the house quickly, I'd truly be happy."
Chloe's smile suddenly turned cold as she spoke to me. I doubted the woman's character before me. Charles looked away, pretending to be engrossed in the newspaper, as if he had nothing to do with it. Though Chloe was the one who strongly wished for Kevin and his wife to stay at our home, she wanted nothing to do with the baby's care. I did everything I could to help Mia, who always deeply thanked me despite being overwhelmed with caring for the baby. "Thank you so much for everything. Don't worry about it. You're going through the hardest time right now, and if there's anything I can do to help, I will." That was a heartfelt sentiment from me. After a particularly busy few months, Kevin suddenly said to me, "I have something important to tell you." "I'm listening," I responded while preparing dinner in the kitchen. Without stopping my chopping, I waited for Kevin to speak. "Grandma, I want to talk to you alone. There's a place I want you to come to this Sunday. Let's keep it a secret from Mom and Dad." My hand holding the knife stopped. A secret from Chloe. When I looked at Kevin, he had a subtle smile as if trying to hide his joy. It was a look he often had as a child when he was plotting something secretly to make me happy. Kevin had always been close to me and my late husband since he was little. Looking back, maybe Chloe felt that her only son's affections were being stolen by me and my husband. That wouldn't have been fun for Chloe. Probably that feeling continues, and Kevin realized that when I'm with Chloe, I feel intimidated and can't speak my mind. I felt dearly loved by my kind grandson and his wife. Next Sunday, Kevin, Mia, and the baby led me to a newly built apartment, about a 10-minute walk from our house. Kevin shared that he had purchased this apartment before the baby was born as we walked. I was deeply surprised by his decisiveness to buy it without consulting Chloe, who had strongly suggested living together. "Sorry for making you walk, Grandma."
"I need to strengthen my legs anyway. This distance is nothing."
I lightly tapped my thin legs. Though just a 10-minute walk made my knees ache, I resolved not to mention it. The new apartment room was furnished simply, with boxes in the corner. Presumably belonging to Mia, who used to live alone before she got married. Kevin, familiar with the place, started making coffee in the kitchen, while Mia was putting the baby to sleep in another room. "So, there's something I wanted to ask you." Kevin began speaking seriously after a brief pause. The ticking of the clock on the wall seemed unusually loud.
"Would you live with us?"
I was so surprised by the sudden proposal that I nearly dropped my mug. Kevin looked at me earnestly. Thinking it was a joke, I returned a strained smile, and Kevin looked away distantly.
"Ever since I was a child, I couldn't stand seeing Mom treating you so badly."
"Well, your mom has a bit of a strong personality, but..."
"You're always being told to leave the house, aren't you? Dad won't talk back, and I can't stand to see you being treated so poorly by Mom anymore."
"What are you talking about? I'm being treated fine."
"Remember when I said I had someone I wanted to introduce to you? I've been thinking about something for a long time."
I vaguely remembered such a conversation. It was a while ago, but I distinctly remembered Kevin speaking with an implication of determination when he talked about getting married.
"I've been cherished by you and Grandpa since I was little, and I loved both of you. But somehow, I felt Mom was very rude towards you too. I've always watched the two of you and thought that when I grew up, I wanted to help. Kevin, Did you really think that way?
Kevin leaned forward decisively, looking into my eyes.
Let's live together. There's no need for you to suffer alone in that house.
Unable to respond, Mia quietly returned and sat next to Kevin. Mia seemed to have listened to the conversation from the next room and looked at me solemnly, understanding the context. Kevin told me about it. Would it be possible for you to live with us? That's a very kind offer. I'm truly happy. But I don't want to intrude on your newlywed life. That's not a problem at all. We need your help as an experienced parent, and it would be reassuring to have you live with us. And apparently, Mia had also been subjected to Chloe's harassment, feeling disgusted with her. Mia had been scorned for having a shotgun wedding and had been yelled at to quiet the baby during night crying. Initially, Mia had wanted to move back to her parents' house after giving birth, but...
So you hate being with me, I understand.
Chloe would say so every time, and Mia was tired of explaining.
We're asking you. Please, would you live with us?
Kevin and Mia pleaded together. Silently watching them, I felt tears streaming down my face.
Thank you.
At that moment, no other words came to mind. Thus, it was decided that I would live with Kevin and his family. Of course, this news would soon reach Chloe's ears. As soon as I agreed to move in, Kevin apparently contacted Chloe and Charles. This was something I had asked Kevin to do. I was certain Chloe would strongly oppose to it. Telling myself this was my final battle, I left Kevin and his family at the apartment and headed home, opening the front door. As soon as I returned, Chloe summoned me to the living room and began yelling at me furiously.
What do you mean you're going to live with Kevin? You're joking, right?
No.
I'm grateful for Kevin's offer and I've decided to accept it. You're kidding, right?
Chloe scoffed. Beside her, Charles frowned, his face troubled.
Moving in with a newlywed couple? That doesn't sound sane. It's obvious you'll be a burden to Kevin.
I was worried about that too. But both of them have accepted me. I want to honestly accept their feelings.
How could this be happening? You say something too, will you?
Until then, Charles had been silent, now staring at Chloe with a vacant look in his eyes. His gaze was powerless, his body seemed to slump. Chloe, I want a divorce.
What? What is it with you all of a sudden?
I can't take this life anymore. Charles, usually quiet, raised his voice, causing Chloe to step back in surprise. He stood up, confronted Chloe directly, and glared at her with intense eyes.
I can't continue with you. Not just your attitude towards me, but what you've done to Mom all this time, I could never forgive. What the heck? You're not used to getting angry, don't start now. The problem here right now is about Evelyn living with Kevin, isn't it? Mom is going to live with Kevin. That's the end of that discussion. Now, it's about you and me. I can't live with you anymore. Why is this suddenly coming up? I've been tolerating your attitude because Mom put up with it. But if Mom's moving out to live with Kevin, that's a different story. Now it's about you and me. I want to divorce you for all the suspicious acts and alleged affairs since we were young. I haven't done anything like that.
Chloe, unusually flustered, looked away, her eyes darting around. Charles was gentle, but when he got angry as a child, he was unstoppable. Probably, Chloe had never seen Charles angry. When he did get angry, he would meticulously prepare to thoroughly defeat his opponent. As expected, Charles casually pulled out a large brown envelope from his company bag and spread its contents messily on the table. It was a report from an infidelity investigation conducted years ago, proving Chloe's affair without needing to read the details. Chloe was speechless and slumped into her seat. Without another word, Charles returned to his room. I noticed the living room curtains fluttering. So, the window was open. Feeling the gentle breeze coming through the window, I wondered if our embarrassing conversation had been overheard by the neighbors and massaged my temples. "Chloe, I can't say anything about you and Charles, but I hope you two can talk it through properly." Chloe just sat there silently, not answering. Then, it came to a lawsuit because Chloe refused to divorce, but the investigation into the affair was the final blow, and the divorce was finalized. I heard rumors that Chloe didn't change her aggressive self even after the divorce, and people gradually distanced themselves from her, leading her to live lonely days. By the time the divorce was finalized, I had already been living with Kevin and the others for 6 months now. I was feeling happy every day, helping with the care of my great-grandchild. Then one day,
"Grandma, Dad's here."
returning from a walk with my great-grandchild, Charles was sitting in the apartment living room with a serious expression on his face. Seeing my son's face for the first time in 6 months since I left the house, he seemed somewhat healthier. After laying down the great-grandchild I was holding to bed, I smiled at Charles. "Have you been able to sleep since the divorce?"
"Thanks to you, I've been getting about 8 hours."
Charles said this with a brighter expression than I had ever seen before. That's right, my son was someone who used to show such innocent smiles. Even though he has aged and grown a beard, I couldn't help but reminisce about his youthful appearance and laugh bitterly at the comparison to his present self.
"So, what brings you here today? Don't tell me you want to live with us?"
Well, that's actually why I came. Of course, I'll contribute to the new home expenses as well.
"Of course. You're now able to properly manage your finances after the divorce."
I've already settled things with Kevin and Mia. We're thinking of purchasing this apartment with the inheritance left by Dad, who passed away, in a way that the two of them would agree with. And from now on, I'll be able to protect you, Mom. Originally, Charles was timid by nature but never was a weak man. I'm sure it was the result of him carefully considering his future and taking action after the divorce from Chloe. I looked at my son, my grandson, Mia, and my great-grandchild in turn and closed my eyes. The image of my late husband appeared behind my eyelids. With a peaceful expression.
"Isn't that wonderful?"
It seemed like my late husband was smiling. "What's so wonderful about it? You've put me through so much trouble. If you had lived a little longer, maybe I would have been happier." Thinking this, I then reconsidered. My current happiness is thanks to Kevin and Mia, who wished for my happiness. My gratitude towards these two cannot be fully expressed in words. Suddenly, my great-grandchild started crying as if a fire had been lit, and I quickly rushed to the bed and picked him up. After rocking him a few times, my great-grandchild fell completely at ease in my arms and started breathing softly in sleep.
A wife who neglects her housework is not needed in this house, right? Such a useless woman does not deserve to be my son's wife.
"Leave this house."
Chloe, my mother-in-law, said this to me, and with a smile, I replied,
"Understood."
I left the house and went back to my parents' home. Probably Chloe will storm into my parents' home. I don't know what will happen to me from now on. I am Sophia, a 25-year-old housewife. I married Timothy last year and have been living a smooth life. Except for one thing, Chloe's presence makes our newlywed life less peaceful. Chloe is a son-obsessed, clingy mother. Especially since Timothy is an only child. We live at a medium distance and meet only a few times a year. Whenever I see Chloe, she annoyingly checks whether I am taking good care of Timothy. Last time we met, "You're taking care of Timothy properly, right? Listen, Timothy loves meat and hates fish. You remember that, right?" I remember you said during our first meeting that your favorite dish to cook is fish stew. If you're serving Timothy the same thing, I won't let it slide," she said. Chloe seems desperate to make sure I am doing my household duties and making meals that Timothy enjoys. Timothy loves the fish stew I make, and we have never had any trouble with meals. I can let it go, but she looked at my clothes, saying, "You're dressed so inappropriately. When standing beside Timothy, you should dress to match him. A short skirt? How vulgar. Are you trying to tempt other men?" I was utterly baffled. My skirt was knee-length and quite modest. Timothy has a simple style, and my outfit that day matched his. It seemed Chloe didn't want me to outshine Timothy. "When you two are together, everyone's eyes go to Sophia. It's because of the bright colors of your clothes. From now on, wear a white shirt and black pants. Don't wear anything else." Chloe, beaming as if she had a great idea, got a wry smile from me. Thankfully, Timothy stood up for me. "What are you talking about, Mom? I think Sophia is cute no matter what she wears, and she should wear what she likes. Stop hassling her with your weird demands." Saying. Chloe often comes up with these nonsensical requests. On the other hand, my father-in-law is harmless but doesn't contribute positively either. He always seems preoccupied, either reading the newspaper or watching news on TV, never joining in our conversations. He turned a blind eye to whatever Chloe said to me, right in front of him. I've tried to talk to him several times since getting married. But because he shows no interest in chatting, the conversation dies down quickly. Honestly, visiting my in-laws has always been a burdensome event for me. Then one day, I started feeling unwell and couldn't manage the household chores. I thought my headache and slight fever would pass, but Timothy was worried and decided we should visit a doctor the next day. It was a Saturday, and Timothy had the day off. Our usual clinic was only open in the morning on Saturdays. The doctor asked if I could be pregnant, and I remembered my period was late. "Maybe I am pregnant," I said, and took a pregnancy test right there. The result was positive. We immediately visited a nearby gynecologist, and it was confirmed I was pregnant. Timothy and I were overjoyed. Especially Timothy, with tears streaming down his face. "Sophia, thank you." He kept thanking me over and over again. But when we reported the pregnancy to our parents, Chloe showed up at our house carrying a huge bag. I was suffering from severe morning sickness and was holed up in the bathroom, unable to come out. As the doorbell was repeatedly rung, I hurried out of the bathroom to answer it, and there was Chloe. "Chloe? You were trying to pretend you weren't home, weren't you?" "No, I was just in the bathroom." "I don't care, just let me in." I staggered to the door and opened it. Chloe was holding a large Boston bag, and I had a bad feeling. "We're going to live together until the baby grows up." I was stunned by Chloe's sudden words. I couldn't just leave her at the entrance, so I let her into the house. "I'll make some coffee," I said, and headed to the kitchen, and called Timothy while waiting for the water to boil. It was a weekday afternoon, and Timothy was at work as usual. I was worried if he would answer, but he did after a few rings. "Sophia? Is something wrong?" "Hey, Chloe came over. She's carrying a big bag. Do you know anything?" "Eh? I haven't heard anything. But she said she would come by soon. I never thought she'd come when I'm not home." "I see. I'll ask Chloe for the details." "Sorry. If Mom says something weird, you can kick her out." "Oh, sorry, I have to hang up." Timothy seemed busy and hung up. As if I can just kick her out because she says something weird. He really doesn't get it. I sighed a little. Timothy is generally kind and cherishes me, but he doesn't think through the consequences of prioritizing my wishes. I can imagine the uproar Chloe would make if I tried to kick her out. For now, I just prepared the coffee and served it to Chloe. "Chloe, what brings you here today?" "Timothy is at work. He'll be home around 6 p.m. This doesn't look good." "What?" Confused by Chloe's sudden remark, I watched as she took a sip of the coffee I had prepared. Young people are hopeless. They can't even make a decent cup of coffee. Poor Timothy, having to drink this. I'll teach you how to make coffee right now. Come here. I'm sorry, my morning sickness is quite bad. Could we do this some other time when I'm feeling better? It's just morning sickness. It's fine, you'll feel better if you eat something. Come on, hurry up. Then, for an hour, Chloe's coffee-making lesson began. As I started feeling nauseous, Chloe opened the cupboard on her own, took out a plate, and placed a piece of bread. Eat this. You'll feel better if you eat. The smell of the bread made me feel even sicker, and I ran to the bathroom. With a headache and nausea, my mind was a blur. For the 3 hours until Timothy came home, I was holed up in the bathroom. Chloe kept knocking on the door in front of the bathroom, but I didn't have the energy to respond. Around 6 p.m., Timothy came home. First, Timothy was surprised to see Chloe making a fuss in front of the bathroom. I had fallen asleep in the bathroom, and when I woke up, Chloe and Timothy were arguing outside. Why did you suddenly come? Sophia is suffering from morning sickness, don't be a nuisance. I came to supervise whether this girl is properly doing her housework as a housewife. I bet she's just using her morning sickness as an excuse to be lazy. I was shocked that she can't even make coffee properly. The coffee Sophia makes is delicious. And what's this supervision about? Sophia isn't someone who would use morning sickness as an excuse to slack off on housework. If she couldn't do it, maybe her morning sickness is really bad? Sophia, you were holed up in the bathroom for 3 hours. Timothy is so naive, he's easily deceived. I really need to be here to guide Sophia. I got married to make those around me happy. Even if Sophia were slacking off, I wouldn't mind. As long as she's doing what she wants and staying by my side, I don't want anything more. No need for guidance. Please go home. I smiled at Timothy's words. The symptoms of my morning sickness had subsided, so I opened the bathroom door. Welcome home, Timothy. Chloe, sorry for leaving you alone. You! How can you lock yourself in the bathroom when you have a guest? What kind of nerve do you have? Well, I couldn't show Chloe my messy state, so I locked myself in the bathroom. I'm truly sorry about that. Anyway, I've made dinner, so make sure you eat all of it. With that, Chloe said, and Timothy pointed to the entrance. No, Mom, please go home. No way. I've already told Dad that I'm staying here. I don't trust young people. See, she didn't even prepare dinner because she was holed up in the bathroom with morning sickness. I'm definitely not going back. Chloe stubbornly refused to move. Forcing her out would not satisfy Chloe, so I decided to allow her to stay. Then, maybe you can stay for a while. But I knew Timothy was worried about me, but kicking her out now would only create more trouble later. I smiled at Timothy to reassure him. It's okay. After that, Chloe tried to force me to eat chicken. Lately, I've been mainly eating vegetables and fruits. With severe morning sickness, even the sight of fried food, let alone bread, made me feel sick. Chloe complained about this too, but Timothy was completely on my side, which was a great help. The next day, worried about leaving me alone with Chloe. Call me if anything happens. It's okay to lock yourself in the bathroom, Timothy said to me before going to work. As expected, Chloe complained about everything I did. If I cleaned, she complained I was too slow. If I did laundry, she said I should care more for Timothy's clothes than mine. Each time, all right, I just responded. When morning sickness hit and I rushed to the bathroom, Chloe would knock on the door. When I came out,
Keep bathroom visits under 5 minutes,
she said. Chloe did nothing but complain, while I struggled with housework in the midst of severe morning sickness. I knew this would happen when I allowed Chloe to stay, but honestly, I wanted her to go back to the in-laws' house soon. I did as much as Chloe said as I could without overexerting myself. Timothy, except for one day when he was late due to a company drinking party, came home early without overtime, and there didn't seem to be any major problems. After about 5 days of living like this, Chloe finally said something to me. That day, my morning sickness was particularly bad, and in the middle of cleaning, I left the vacuum cleaner and rushed to the bathroom, unable to come out for many minutes. Then Chloe stood in front of the bathroom and began to yell.
Hey you! Weren't you in the middle of cleaning? Are you expecting me to do it? Enough is enough! Claiming to have severe morning sickness, are you just slacking off? Thinking you can just hide in the bathroom?
I didn't have the energy to respond to Chloe, but she kept complaining endlessly. The symptoms of my morning sickness had subsided, but I didn't feel like facing the continually fussing Chloe, so I just sat on the toilet seat waiting for Chloe to calm down. As I was sighing, wondering whether to call Timothy. A wife who neglects her housework is not needed in this house, right? Such a useless woman does not deserve to be my son's wife. Leave this house, Chloe suddenly said. I immediately came out of the bathroom and understood. I replied with a broad smile and went straight to my room. Chloe followed me, looking puzzled, but I locked the door to my room, making sure she couldn't enter. Then, I packed a travel bag with some clothes and valuables that I had stored in my closet. Knowing Chloe would try to stop me if I left now, I waited until she left the front of my room. Chloe kept knocking on my room's door, but after waiting for about 2 hours, she finally left. I heard a door close in the distance, probably her going to the bathroom. I grabbed my bag and immediately left the house, getting a taxi to my parents' home. When I arrived at my parents' house, my mom, who was a housewife and at home, was very surprised. My dad wasn't at work, so I explained the situation to my mom first. I understand that Chloe loves her son and doesn't think highly of me. But still, it's annoying to be complained at up close. My mom didn't get particularly angry, but just gave a wry smile. Well, mother-in-law and daughter-in-law conflict is common everywhere. It might be good for you to stay home for a while. Chloe seems like she can look after Timothy. You think so? Aren't you going to get mad about what she's doing to your daughter? Well, Sophia, you must be up to something, right? My mom seemed to see right through everything. Then, I contacted Timothy and told him I would stay at my parents' house until Chloe went back home. Timothy also felt it was safer that way, and I relaxed at my parents' house for the first time in a long time. The next day, as expected, Chloe came to my parents' house. When I opened the door and showed my face, Chloe turned red and started making a fuss. Why are you back at your parents' house? Hurry back and make Timothy's dinner. It's a failure as a wife to go to such lengths to avoid housework. But I replied with a smile. Eh? I just did what you told me to, right? You said to leave, didn't you? Are you saying I should have slept outside instead of going back to my parents' house? What's with this girl? So irritating. I didn't really mean for you to leave. I'm just saying you should do your housework properly. I was doing my housework as you told me to. I don't understand why I have to do it quickly, but the quality of my housework doesn't change just because I went to the bathroom in the middle. Then Chloe's eyes narrowed in anger. Don't talk nonsense. When I was pregnant, I didn't go to the bathroom so much. Eating makes the nausea go away. Despite that, you don't listen. Then, from behind me, Mom came. With a troubled look, Mom gently spoke to Chloe. Chloe, you had a different symptom, didn't you? My daughter has different symptoms. She's a different person, so it's natural for her morning sickness symptoms to be different. Please don't assume she's the same just because you experienced it. What are you saying? Children should listen to their parents. At that, Chloe seemed taken aback for a moment, and I smiled. Huh. I see. So Chloe, you just wanted to manipulate me to do as you wish? No one will act exactly as you want them to. That includes Stephen as well. Confused by my words, Chloe tilted her head. Stephen? Your husband. You're so busy meddling in your son's household that you've completely forgotten about your own. Perhaps it's time you return to your own home? Then Chloe started making a phone call. Probably to her husband's number. But the call didn't connect, it seemed like she was blocked, and in a panic, Chloe rushed back home. Later, I heard from Timothy that when Chloe returned to the in-laws' house, there was only a divorce application stamped by her husband and a note with a single line on the table. The note apparently said that he would take all the retirement pay as the distribution of property, and everything else would be left to her. Chloe tried contacting her husband at his workplace, but he had already retired, and his whereabouts became unknown. But in reality, he hasn't retired from his job yet. He was staying for a month for handover and had asked the company to tell Chloe that he had retired if she called. Actually, Timothy and I knew where he was. He was staying in a business hotel and planning to live with a relative in a distant region after retirement. We were supposed to inform him when Chloe filed for divorce, and he said he wanted to start a new life then. About a week ago, when Chloe came to my house and it got late, I called him. "Chloe is at our house, are you okay, Stephen? Aren't you lonely by yourself?" When I asked him kindly, Raphael, who usually hardly spoke, opened up about his true feelings. Maybe because it was over the phone and not face to face, he could speak without stress. "Sophia, you're the only one who worries about someone like me. My wife has always treated me like an ATM, never as a husband. When Timothy was young, if I tried to play with him, she'd say, 'Don't touch him, you're dirty, stay away.' Maybe that's why Timothy became unsure how to interact with me. I've always been timid and lived a rather dull life under my wife's thumb. You're right, I've always been lonely." At that moment, I thought I could use Raphael to drive Chloe away. There would still be interactions with Chloe in the future. If I forced her out now, I could be endlessly complained at. In the worst case, if Chloe persuaded Raphael to leave their house and said they had nowhere to go, they might both end up at our house, making it difficult for us to refuse. I discussed it with Timothy, and he had been aware since he was young that his parents were a sham couple and wanted to do something about it. I had Timothy pretend to be working overtime and visit the in-laws' house to have a heart-to-heart talk with Raphael. Raphael then confessed to Timothy that he wanted a divorce from Chloe. So, we decided to have Raphael proceed with the preparations for the divorce. I had been waiting for the right moment when Chloe would seriously listen to me. I thought she might calm down a bit in a place away from her own territory, like my parents' house, and thankfully, it worked better than expected. Faced with her own issues, Chloe quickly returned to the in-laws' house, so I decided to go back to my house too. Timothy and I then persuaded Chloe. We carefully explained to her how she had been making Raphael suffer, that Raphael wanted to be free, and that if she continued to be difficult, Raphael was prepared to take the matter to court. We warned her that if it came to a court case, both Timothy and I would side with Raphael. Finally, Chloe stamped the divorce papers and submitted them to the office. After that, Chloe ended up living alone in the in-laws' house. She seemed lonely and wanted to live in our house, but Timothy firmly refused. "If you come here, Sophia will go back to her parents' house. If that happens, I'll never consider you as my mother again. Just like you ignored Dad, I'll ignore you as if you didn't exist." With Timothy's firm statement, Chloe, dejected, went back to the in-laws' house. I feel fortunate to have such a reliable husband. As for Raphael, as soon as Timothy informed him about the finalized divorce, he immediately moved out of the relative's house and into a small apartment. He got a job in the same field as before his retirement. Though his income dropped a bit, he's more relaxed than when he lived with Chloe and now happily immerses himself in his hobbies every day. Later, I safely gave birth to a baby. A healthy girl. When I'm in trouble, my mom helps as much as possible, and Chloe is only allowed to meet my daughter when I permit it. Thanks to this, I'm managing to raise my child without stress. I believe that, though there will be challenges ahead, as long as I'm with Timothy, who cares deeply for me, we can overcome anything.
Why are you even here?
I smiled sweetly at my husband, who was pointing and yelling at me, sitting at the attorney's bench in the courtroom. My husband, causing a commotion, was cautioned by the judge. He reluctantly fell silent, but his eyes were still glaring fiercely. "It's your fault for having an affair and getting sued for alimony in this divorce case. To think it even led to a trial." As I calmly pointed to the evidence and cornered my husband, he slumped, utterly dejected. But this trial is not the end. I will pursue you relentlessly. Be prepared. I murmured quietly to myself. My name is Scott, I'm 48 years old and a lawyer. I married my husband George 21 years ago. He runs a company, and we were both busy with work, so we chose a child-free life. Instead, we made as much time as possible for each other, going to movies and traveling. George once dreamt of becoming a movie director. Though that dream never materialized, he started a video production company after we got married. In recent years, he became busy with a new venture, and before I knew it, our time together had dwindled. Still, as a couple in our late 40s, I thought this was to be expected and didn't worry much about it. Never in my wildest dreams did I imagine he was having an affair. The future I vaguely envisioned, growing old together, was suddenly shattered.
Scott, can you take over this case for me? Thanks.
3 months ago, my boss assigned me a divorce case involving a claim for alimony. Our law firm handles many divorce cases, so it wasn't an unusual assignment. If the husband is cheating, he should just settle the alimony before it goes to trial. In this case, the husband is suing his wife for divorce and alimony due to her affair, and also making claims against her lover. The divorce is already settled, and the wife has finished paying the alimony. However, the issue is with her lover. A company president with substantial wealth, who insists he's not responsible and refuses to pay the alimony. Initially, another lawyer in my firm was handling this case, but he got swamped with other matters, and it was passed to me since I had some free time. During the handover, Paul apologetically mentioned,
"This guy is quite a piece of work. Looks down on everyone else."
That statement had slightly bothered me. A tricky cheater, huh? I wonder what kind of person he is. As I was going through the documents handed to me to check the defendant, to my astonishment, the name written there was George. My husband. It seems neither my boss nor my colleagues had realized this. What does this mean? He was having an affair behind my back? I double-checked the documents several times, thinking it might be someone with the same name, but the workplace matched his company, and even the birth date and address were correct. I remembered, a few months ago, he who were back home unusually early asked me, "Your firm handles a lot of divorce cases, right?" "Yes, but why?" "A friend of mine is in trouble. He's been sued for alimony over an affair, and he's not happy with the amount." "What happens if he doesn't want to pay?" "Usually, they start with a lawyer and try to settle, but if that fails, it'll go to civil mediation if it's between a husband and the affair partner." "Oh? So it doesn't go straight to court?" "It can, but most people don't want to because it's costly and time-consuming. So, many give up and settle even after going through mediation." "Huh. So you don't have to pay." Come to think of it, there was a precedent where they didn't have to pay even after going to the Supreme Court. I forgot when it was.
"What? You don't have to pay even if it goes to court?"
At that moment, his peculiar delight made me feel uneasy. But if someone's breaking up a family, they should make amends, I think. "Who's this friend?" "You wouldn't know him, Scott." No matter how much I asked, he refused to disclose the friend's name. Was that conversation actually about himself? Unbelievable. I was so happy that night, thinking we could finally have dinner together after a long time. It seemed he only wanted information that would benefit him. According to the documents, the affair between my husband and the other woman started 5 years ago when she was hired as an accountant at his company. That was about the time he started saying he was busy with a new business, leading to more overtime and business trips. So that was it. But I also didn't notice the changes in my husband as my workload increased with more cases to handle. The affair came to light 6 months ago when the other woman's husband found out. The discussion between the woman, her husband, and the distribution of property, and the amount of alimony in the divorce case caused some friction, but it was quickly resolved through mediation by a colleague lawyer and didn't go to court. However, around the same time, the husband filed a claim for alimony against George, the affair partner. "I don't want to pay." He refused. He dodged the issue during mediation as well, refusing to acknowledge any responsibility for the alimony. I never imagined he would use the information I gave him in such a way, and anger surged within me.
So, he was cheating and using me all along. I won't let this go easily.
That's why I decided to divorce him and press on relentlessly. In situations like this, lawyers are not supposed to handle cases involving their own family members. But there's an exception if the client agrees. I immediately contacted the client, Randy. "You're George's wife?" The next day, at the cafe where we met, Randy was quite surprised as I explained the situation.
"Yes. And with your consent, I'd like to handle this case."
"Wouldn't that mean you'd conduct the trial favorably for your husband?"
"That will absolutely not happen. Because once this trial is resolved, I plan to immediately file for divorce myself."
I have no intention of being cheated on and just letting it slide. I plan to fight back, as a wife and as a lawyer, with my pride on the line.
"If you're that determined, please, take the case."
Randy, sensing my resolve, officially asked me to represent him. But George has been consistently refusing to pay the alimony. It's terrible considering he's a wealthy company president and not in need of money. I'm not after the alimony. I want him to properly apologize for destroying our family. Randy clenched his fists and bit his lip in frustration. The discussion between Randy and his wife about the distribution of property already favored him due to the affair admission and photographic evidence, so the matter was already settled.
I really wanted to end all this as quickly as possible and forget about it. But I just can't let it go like this. Your feelings are completely justified.
George, being a business owner, is clever and can talk his way out of anything. I'm just a simple salaryman, can I even compete?
Not at all. People who believe they are clever often make trivial mistakes in unexpected places. I will make sure to corner him, just leave it to me.
Our marriage wasn't going well to begin with, and he even said he doesn't see the point in paying alimony. That wasn't the case. If George hadn't laid a hand on my wife, we would have been fine. The frustration in Randy's tone was palpable. Naturally, no one wants to go through a costly and time-consuming trial. George probably looks down on Randy, a company employee, thinking he can get away with anything because he's a wealthy president. That's what I felt. George was kind and wonderful before our marriage. But after he became independent and started his own business 15 years ago, money started flowing in, and he gradually changed. The places we dined at shifted from local bars to upscale restaurants, and eventually, he started saying that those who eat at cheap places are poor. Whenever I admonished him, he initially blushed and apologized, but eventually,
"These are bottom feeders who can't even start their own business,"
he started saying. His company was thriving, and perhaps he got carried away. But success in business isn't always a given. As a lawyer, having seen many who failed yet managed to recover, I believed he would eventually come to realize this. Yet, he seems to have become more arrogant than I ever imagined. Luckily, or unfortunately, he's still unaware that I know about his affair.
"Just watch, I won't let this go."
I contacted someone to gather compelling evidence against him, and prepared meticulously for days for the trial. On the day of the court hearing, as I sat in the courtroom with Randy, George entered, pointed at me, and yelled,
"Why are you even here?" "I will be representing Randy. I'm Scott, the attorney in charge. Your lawyer has been informed about the change of representation."
George glanced at his lawyer in disbelief, who nodded in confirmation.
"You probably outsourced everything to the company's legal advisor, not bothering to check who the new attorney was." "That's ridiculous. I don't accept you being in charge."
"I have the client's consent. Your consent, as the defendant, is not needed in this case."
"I don't care, change the lawyer."
He, causing a commotion, was quieted by the judge but kept glaring at me.
"It's your fault for having an affair and getting sued for alimony. To think it even led to a trial."
Throughout the trial,
"I shouldn't have to pay alimony for the affair,"
he persistently claimed. It's not my fault we got divorced. Insisting on just that one point. He probably researched Supreme Court precedents based on my information. But he misunderstood them.
There's a Supreme Court decision saying you don't have to pay, so I don't see why I should.
Indeed, a previous case did dismiss a claim for alimony due to mental distress caused by an affair.
See?
He sat back, smug and confident. Are you aware of the rest of that precedent? While it's true that alimony for mental distress was not granted, claims for alimony due to the affair itself are valid.
What?
George, looking dumbfounded, while his lawyer scrambled to check the precedent. No company lawyer, however proficient in corporate law, can match a divorce specialist. And so, the trial concluded with him ordered to pay $30,000 in alimony for the affair. It's a court decision, so non-payment now risks liens or enforcement actions. Realizing he couldn't escape, his shoulders slumped in defeat. But this isn't the end. I will continue to pursue this thoroughly. Be prepared. From that day on, he never returned home. I expected as much. So, the next day, I sent a petition for our divorce trial to his company, along with certain documents.
Please, no more trials. I'll pay the alimony for the divorce as you demand.
A few days later, summoned by my husband, I went to his company's meeting room with a colleague lawyer. As soon as he saw me, he apologized to me. Oh, so you'll also properly handle the distribution of property, as I suggest. That's. Investigations revealed my husband's personal assets exceeded $5 million. This was because he cleverly funneled company money into his pocket and, unbeknownst to me, had made me a company officer, drawing a monthly salary of $8,000. The assets you built after marriage are jointly owned, right? Splitting them would make me a millionaire. And I was an officer. I had no idea. That's a tax-saving measure every company practices. Maybe, but isn't it strange that I, the concerned party, was unaware? Is that all just for tax savings? There are quite some suspicious money movements. Maybe this lawyer here and the accountant lady knew about it? The lawyer beside him averted his gaze upon meeting my eyes. You realize such actions could strip you of your lawyer's license, right? I've already reported this to the Bar Association. His lawyer turned pale and trembled, aware of the gravity of his actions. Of course, you're prepared for the company to collapse due to these illegalities, right?
I just had an affair. I apologize to you, and I've long split up with that woman. Why does the company have to go down too?
Because I am a lawyer. I can't overlook the wrongdoings I've found.
How? And how did you get the company's internal documents?
You conspired with the company's president, the legal advisor, and the accountant lady to commit fraud. But there are still people in the company who can't tolerate such corruption. The person I had contacted before was the company's vice president. He had supported George and built up the company from the start, but could no longer bear his changing nature. So, when I reached out and explained the situation, he readily cooperated. The vice president wept, hoping you'd return to your original, pure intentions.
He did what?
And yet, you found the vice president, who cautioned you, bothersome, and threatened to fire him.
That's because he nagged me over using some company money. You too. Just because you're a lawyer, you act all high and mighty.
He lashed out at me in frustration, so I was about to say something right back, but my colleague lawyer calmed me down. Then, the colleague presented him with divorce papers and a settlement document. If you sign these divorce papers and the agreement now, we can avoid a trial. So, you'll forgive everything? Yes, I'll forgive the affair. Fine. He, relieved to avoid a trial, signed the documents, ignoring his own lawyer's protests. Done signing. Is this okay? Yes. But I'll report the embezzlement from this company to the police, as it's a criminal matter.
What? That's not what you promised. You said you'd forgive everything.
I said I'd forgive the affair. How many times do I have to say it? As a lawyer, there's no way I'd overlook a cover-up. He seemed to want to retort, but he was at a loss for words. The upcoming trial will be tough. Need a lawyer? Oh, but I've already been asked to represent the vice president. Then, I guess I'll see you in court next time. I declared this to him and his lawyer, then left the conference room with my colleague. Serve you right. I'll make sure the next trial is just as thorough, so look forward to it. My colleague gave a wry smile as I silently celebrated with a small fist pump. That's what he gets for underestimating a lawyer wife. I beamed a wide smile at my colleague. Thus, George and I divorced. We went through the distribution of property, but most of it was deemed not personal assets as it was illegally manipulated company funds. Subsequently, George and his lawyer were sued by the vice president for embezzlement and arrested. They are currently in trial, detained in jail due to the severity of the crime and risk of destroying evidence. It looks like they won't see daylight for a while. Even if they were released, the huge debt they'll face is evident. As for me, I didn't become a millionaire from the distribution of property from George, nor did I want to. Money earned rightfully by one's effort is sufficient. Moreover, my fulfillment as a lawyer comes from being able to help many people. I intend to continue dedicating myself to others, upholding the spirit of freedom and justice, equality and fairness.